This is the official weigh-ins. There are actually 2 weigh-ins at these big events. We've got the official weigh-ins now, and then later tonight, we've got the ceremonial weigh-ins. Aiemann, why are there 2 weigh-ins, for those that are curious?
Well, back in the day, there used to be only one weigh-in, and it was late in the afternoon around 4 p.m. But for the health of the fighters, they decided to have an official weigh-in at 9 a.m. so that guys can start rehydrating early, and they'll have almost 36 hours to rehydrate. It's for their brain health, right? So that they have a lower chance of getting a concussion because they'll be more rehydrated because they'll have more time to accept the fluid in their body. But then at 4 p.m., they have the ceremonial weigh-in because they don't want people showing up here at 8 a.m. lining up outside. They got to do it in the afternoon so people can go to work, leave work a little bit early, and then line up and enjoy a nice ceremonial weigh-in.
Well, I think we might see a few less people at the ceremonial weigh-in today than we would have if we had our original main event. Conor McGregor, unfortunately, having to withdraw from his fight with Michael Chandler on short notice, 2 weeks to put this new card together. He has an injured toe, but based on what we have on this card, you've got 3 fights on this main card that have been put together in the last few weeks, because not only did McGregor have to withdraw, the co-main event has been completely abandoned as well. Originally was Khalil Roundtree against Jamal Hill. So now we have a brand new main card for the most part, 3 new fights, but our main event, rematch, incredible fight first time around between Alex Pereira and Jiri Prochazka. What are you expecting in this one? And I don't expect that we're going to see either fighter have any issues making weight today.
Well, I expect fireworks between those guys in the main event. And I would like to just mention that it just shows the nimbleness of the UFC. You know, fighters pull out, and people were already worried that, like, okay, Conor versus Chandler was a great fight, but the rest of the card wasn't strong. But then when that fight got pulled, they added fights to the card in less than a few weeks, and now the card looks very strong, and it's going to be a very entertaining card from the beginning to the end. I think we may even have an overall better card this weekend.
Yeah, I think that if you are a fan of the UFC and you watch the cards religiously, you would have to say this is a better card than what we got with Conor McGregor and Michael Chandler. However, if you're kind of outside of that bubble and you want to see Conor McGregor, of course, there's no bigger thing in mixed martial arts than you can have than a Conor McGregor main event.
Yeah, in terms of casuals and eyeballs and that kind of thing, yeah, a lot of people tune in just for Conor McGregor specifically. But if you're one of those diehard fans that watches UFC every weekend, you absolutely love this card.
I should also add that what Alex Pereira has done in less than 1,000 days in the UFC, 2-division champion, this is going to be his 2nd title defense. What we're seeing from this guy, from being a 2-division champion in Glory Kickboxing at middleweight and light heavyweight, and now coming over to the UFC and doing the same thing. I mean, we're talking about one of the all-time great combat sports athletes.
Yeah, it's incredible. Even I was listening to Chael speak to other journalists yesterday, and he says that Alex Pereira is one of his favorite fighters in the modern day. You know, it says a lot when you have the respect of old stars as well, and people who know fighting deeply, love you as a fan. It says a lot about how good you are.
And we're seeing a lot of kickboxers. Of course, Israel, I think, was sort of the torchbearer for fighters moving over from kickboxing. But Yusri Balgauri, who's fought both of those guys, he actually trains with Alex Pereira. He's going to be on Contender Series again this year. We see Simon Marcus in Canada. He's moving over to mixed martial arts. So we're seeing a lot of these really high-level strikers come over to the sport. I think it just makes the sport way better to have all these really well-versed strikers join.
What's really interesting about MMA is that every few years there's a shift in what's the most important martial art. Like at one point you'll go through like a wrestling phase, and it's the wrestlers taking over, and then it shifts from wrestling to striking, and then from striking to jiu-jitsu, and now we're really in the era of guys are sprawling and brawling and really banging on the feet, and I'm really enjoying this era, the striking era.
Yeah, it was like the Chuck Liddell model back when the light heavyweight division was the division in the UFC, and that was kind of Chuck Liddell's bread and butter.
Yeah, because you know what, fighters, they're always evolving. So if now striking is the hot commodity, guys are getting really good at this. Eventually they're going to learn how to defend the strike so well and still get the takedown again. And then we might see it go back to a wrestling phase. And then maybe the wrestlers are going to rise to the top.
Well, we have a great co-main event as well, another fight that was put together on short notice. We've got Diego Lopez versus Brian Ortega at 145 pounds. And I think that this has a formula for excitement written all over it.
Yeah, I love that match. 2 guys who are very high-level grapplers, quick to get submissions, but also have big hearts and are very durable. And these guys can take damage and dish out some damage. So I'm really excited to see how that fight's going to end up. I really don't know who to pick as a winner or as a favorite for this fight, but if we go just solely based on hairstyle, I'm with Lopez.
yeah, he's got one of the more interesting hairstyles that we've seen. And in fact, we actually saw Brian Ortega, who's got some pretty good hair in his own right.
Yeah, he's got great hair.
He once had to shave his head in order to make weight. So we'll see how that unfolds today when these guys get on the scale in just a couple minutes' time.
Yeah, I don't know if any of the fighters on this card have ever missed weight. Maybe one?
There's a couple. Macy Chiasson has missed weight before, but that was actually at featherweight. It was actually upper weight class, funny enough.
Okay.
She's fighting at 35 today. And then looking down the list, I think that might be the only one really. We haven't had a lot of fighters that are on this card have issues with missing or making weight. But again, we're also looking at a situation where, like I mentioned in this main card, you got 3 fights that have come together in like 2-3 weeks notice, and that's something where fighters are not dieting in the way that they normally would and not at an optimal weight for walking around. So how far out do you start dieting? Like if you have, say, an 8-week fight camp, at what point are you going to start shedding those pounds?
I start dieting as soon as they call me. But before that, I keep myself at a healthy weight. It's not easy to stay too low for too long, because if I stay too light for too long, I'm going to lose my muscle mass. And if I lose my muscle mass, I'm going to be weaker in the gym. And when I'm not training for myself and I'm helping the team, sometimes I spar guys that are a little bit heavier to give them just some extra work. So I don't want to be too small and have a bigger guy fall on top of me or get taken down by somebody and getting hurt.
All right, you hear that voice behind us. We're going to throw it over to Jon Anik as we've got the fighters heading to the scale for UFC 303. I'm not sure if you heard that. Jon Anik has just mentioned that Lopez versus Ortega is moving to 155 pounds.
$115, the official weight for Michelle Waterson-Gomez.
Michelle Waterson first to the scale, 115 pounds, right on weight at straw weight. Former atom weight, so I don't think it's that difficult for her.
145 and a half, the official weight for Andre Fili.
Andre Fili on weight, 145 and a half pounds. He's made Las Vegas his home recently. Did go back to Sacramento for this camp to face Cub Swanson, 2 legends of the featherweight division.
125 and a half, the official weight for Ray Tsuruya.
The road to UFC tournament winner, Ray Tsuruya, has a lot of hype behind him, 125 and a half pounds, a big favorite against Carlos Hernandez.
Our next fighter to the scale, one half of the co-main event live on pay-per-view, number 14 ranked featherweight contender competing at lightweight this Saturday night, Diego Lopez. 155, the official weight for Diego Lopez.
Diego Lopez, 155 pounds now, making his lightweight debut in the UFC, in the co-main event at UFC 303.
All right, moving along now to the women's bantamweight division, competing live on pay-per-view, the number 7 ranked contender, Macy Chiasson. 135 and a half, the official weight for Macy Chiasson.
Macy Chiasson has had some issues in the past with making weight. Looks phenomenal today on the scale, 135 and a half pounds.
All right, next up, prelim in the bantamweight division as we welcome Vinicius Oliveira. 136, the official weight for Vinicius Oliveira.
Very entertaining fight style for Vinicius Oliveira. He makes 136 pounds. His opponent, Ricky Savone, will weigh in sometime soon.
Joe Pyfer. $185.5 for Joe Pyfer.
Joe Pyfer recently lost his first UFC main event and first UFC fight against Jack Hermanson. Weighs in 185.5 pounds. He'll face Canadian Marc-Andre Barriault.
Pay-per-view main card, the number 14 ranked UFC welterweight contender, Michael Venom Page. $171, the official weight for MVP, Michael Venom Page.
After making a successful debut in the UFC in Miami earlier this year against Kevin Holland, Michael Venom Page makes weight 171 pounds. And we've got some TKO double champions about to weigh in.
Marc-Andre Barriault. $185 for Power Bar, Marc-Andre Barriault.
Power Bar makes weight at 185 pounds, and fellow Canadian Charles Jourdain next to the scale.
All right, next fighter to the scale, competing in a featherweight prelim, Charles Jourdain. $146, the official weight for Charles Jourdain.
Charles Jourdain makes weight 146 pounds. All smiles as always. Always has a great attitude.
All right, next man up competing in a prelim in the flyweight division, Carlos Hernandez. $125 for Carlos Hernandez.
We go from Carlos Hernandez, 125 pounds, to a guy who will weigh probably about 140 pounds more than him next in Martin Buday.
All right, next fighter to the stage competing in the heavyweight division. Please welcome Martin Buday. $264.5, the official weight for Martin Buday.
Look at that. I was bang on. Martin Buday actually cuts weight to make heavyweight. He's 264.5 pounds today. Should mention that fighters do get a 1 pound allowance if they're not fighting for a championship. So if you're fighting at flyweight, you can weigh up to 126 pounds, 136 pounds for bantamweight, et cetera, et cetera. And even at heavyweight, you can weigh 266 if you're not fighting for the championship.
Looks like there might be a little bit of a break. There's not many fighters lined up right now.
Well, based on what we're seeing right now, we have not had either main event fighter weigh in for UFC 303 just yet. Probably no cause for alarm at this stage, but again, these guys are taking these fights on fairly short notice, so you just never know.
Yeah, that explains why the Diego Lopez and Brian Ortega fight is at a higher weight class. Both guys probably agreed, you know what, we had a little bit of a short notice. Let's do it at a higher weight so we don't burn ourselves out and give the fans a great show. Because really what we want is entertainment out of it in the end, because they took it on short notice. You can't necessarily expect them to lose, 20 or 25 pounds in 2 weeks.
Yeah, it's a great point. I mean, I think that's the big story so far is that fight has now been bumped up to the lightweight division.
Yeah.
Brian Ortega's talked about wanting to go to the lightweight division after this fight. Of course, I think he's going to get to do that a little bit early now, but he had mentioned he's looking at the picture right now, the title picture at 145 pounds. He said basically he's heard that Max Holloway is getting the next shot and that Alexander Volkanovski is guaranteed the next shot after that. So he said, I can't sit around and wait for a title shot and keep facing these contenders when I could just be having some fun fights right now, moving up to 155 pounds. And I think that there are a lot of exciting fights for him at 155 pounds. You look at the likes of Justin Gaethje. If you want to put on an entertaining fight between him and Brian Ortega, 2 action fighters, I think that would be a great matchup. And just a lot of great competition for him in both of these divisions because he's such an exciting fighter. Yeah,
it's interesting that he said that because, fighters get injured all the time. So if Max Holloway's got the next title shot, but he gets hurt, he should be ready to jump in. Or if Max does the fight and it's Volk's turn and Volk gets hurt, or Topuria gets hurt and there's an interim title, he might get a chance to squeeze in because, like we've said before, the UFC is nimble and they'll make things happen. So he still has a shot to get his hands on a belt, either interim or the actual belt. So it's good for him to move up to 155 if he's looking for action-packed fights. But there's so many good fighters at 145 as well, I'm just saying I don't want him to eat too much damage because I love watching Brian Ortega fight, and I want to see him do the best possible. But if he thinks he's comfortable to move up at 155, there's going to be a lot of entertaining fights for him as well at that weight class.
But those title hopes could go away as quickly as tomorrow facing a guy as good as Diego Lopez, right? So you just never know. But I think it's good for him to kind of plan ahead. And, the burden of making 145 pounds, I think for him, it's a hard weight cut, I would imagine. Like I mentioned earlier, once had to shave his head. Let's go back to John Anik to see who's next.
Heavyweight division, he is the number 10 ranked middleweight contender, Roman Dolidze. .205, the official weight for Roman Dolidze.
Roman Dolidze, the most recent addition to the card, lives here locally in Las Vegas, so for him to make 205 pounds, I think was probably not that difficult for him moving up the weight class. Probably still had to cut a little bit of weight. Middleweight typically walking around at 220, 225. And we're happy to be joined right now by the karate hottie, Michelle Waterson-Gomez. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's like my superhero name, right? The Karate Hottie.
It's a great nickname. This is very remarkable. And it suits you. You looked great on the scale today.
I appreciate it. No, it was a super easy cut. I was kind of worried about it. All camp I was retaining lots of water. But I think this fight camp or just the progression, I've put on some good muscle. So I was able to pull pretty easily from the muscle.
You'll be facing Canadian Gillian Robertson, and I know you've been talking about how excited you are to have an opponent that you can go to the ground with and kind of test yourself there. It's something you've been working on for about many, many years.
Absolutely. Not necessarily test myself, but showcase my skills. You know what I'm saying?
Well, I like that. That's more positive than the way I spun it.
Yes, you did. Yeah, absolutely.
Although I will say she is the all-time submission leader in women's UFC history.
Okay.
I want to ask you, do you have like a certain plan in terms of like maybe footwork or certain strikes to avoid or to catch her trying to take you down?
Absolutely. I think it'd be kind of silly not to have a plan, for sure. So I guess you guys are going to have to tune in on Saturday to see what the plan is.
Yeah, of course. And we were just talking earlier about how, like, right now the trend is striking is dominating the wrestler grappler. We're, like, in a striking era. Yeah. So that might tilt in your favor. You're going to have to avoid, maybe the clinches and colliding with her too much and dance around and throw some strikes up the middle, maybe.
That sounds like a good idea.
Yeah.
You're keeping your cards close to the vest today. I don't even want to ask you about the game plan, but you said this was a pretty easy weight cut for you. I mean, as you get older, you used to fight at atom weight, so it's not necessarily the hardest weight cut for you at 115 pounds. But how has your body chemistry changed over the years? Like, is the cut getting a little bit harder for you these days?
Yeah, it is. I think any older athlete can attest that the older you get, the harder it becomes. Your body's just not the same. You don't snap back the same. You can't go out and party hard and then expect to train the next day. When we're in fight camp, it's 10 weeks out and we're strict and we're locked and loaded and in the zone. So
Well, as we know, you've always had a reputation of partying hard, so it's good that you dialed that back.
I have known to party pretty hard in my day. And oh gosh, I just dated myself back in my day.
Yeah.
Well, I'll date you even further. Last night, Ioana Jędrzejczyk made it into the Hall of Fame, one of the legends of your division. What was it like seeing her get inducted?
It was a long time coming. She is definitely one of the greatest of all time. She's such an amazing person. I'm blessed that I had the opportunity to fight her. We went all 5 rounds. It was a great fight. And after that, after we fought each other, we were able to keep in touch and become good friends.
Well, you were 2 of the class acts of the strawweight division. It's been a pleasure catching up with you today. Looking forward to your fight against Gillian Robertson, keeping it close to the vest. We're excited to see. Now I'm even more excited because I don't know the game plan.
Just don't go out and party tonight. Save it for tomorrow. Don't party tonight. Tomorrow night.
Tomorrow's going to be the party. We'll celebrate tomorrow.
Perfect.
All right, we're looking forward to it. The karate hottie, Michelle Waterson-Gomez, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for joining us. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
That was quick, short, sweet. No, honestly, wherever it goes, it'll go.
We're still live right now. We're still live right now.
We're
so
live on air. Just so you know, we're live.
Wherever it goes, it goes.
Wherever it goes, it goes.
It's MMA, and I'm a mixed martial artist.
Yeah, you're ready for it all. It's great.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Of course.
Say hi to Josh for me. Oh, he's right there. Hey, Josh.
Hey, how are you?
That was Michelle Waterson-Gomez, the karate hottie. Awesome to have her join us here on the UFC 303 official weigh-in show here on Sportsnet.ca, Sportsnet Plus.
I was trying to get some more out of her. I was trying to see if we can pull the
keeping it
game
close
plan
to the
out.
vest,
That's great. That's what she should do.
Mhm.
She can give us the general idea because it's pretty obvious the general idea. She's more striking based. It looks like she probably needs to keep it more on the feet to win this one, and Gillian needs to take it down. So the general idea is interesting, but I would have liked to know if she was planning maybe a flying knee or a push kick up in the straight up the middle, like how Liro Machida knocked out Vitor Belfort. Something like that. When someone's shooting, you can really throw a nice snap kick to the face, and she's very good at those kicks.
I actually think Michelle Gomez's style, I'm still getting used to Waterson-Gomez,
Yeah.
that her style is very tricky for Gillian Robertson, because Gillian Robertson is somebody who really likes to crash the pocket and try to take her opponent down, whereas I think in this fight, Michelle Waterson-Gomez is so good in terms of her distance control and her command of distance. I think that it's something that we've seen from her that she does particularly well, and I think that for Gillian Robertson, that makes it a lot harder for her to close that distance and get it to the ground.
Yeah, and I feel like these days karate kind of gets a bad rep in general, but karate has amazing footwork. And if you look at the foot speed of Gillian Robertson and the foot speed of Karate Hottie, Michelle is way faster, much, much faster on the feet. So if Gillian comes in too linear for that shot and tries to crash in too linear, and Michelle is able to zigzag left and right and create circles, Gillian might miss a takedown, and Michelle may be able to land something very big, something devastating. So don't count her out just because she does karate. Karate is very effective if you train it properly and you spar. Karate or jiu-jitsu or any martial art is only ineffective if you never put it to the test in the gym and get the rounds in. But if you're someone who spars for real, you can be a good karate fighter, you can be a good boxer, you can be a good jiu-jitsu guy. But a boxer who never spars is never going to be a good boxer.
And we're still waiting for her opponent, Gillian Robertson, to hit the scales for their fight at strawweight. And we've seen 2 Canadians make weight so far. We had Charles Jourdain, 146 pounds, Marc-Andre Barriault, 185 pounds on the button. Excited to see all of these Canadians compete. And when you look at how they looked on the scale today, anything you can take away from any of these athletes?
No, everybody looked great. I just want to say that Michelle mentioned that she did have more of a struggle this time around to make weight. And it's funny because when I interviewed Gillian Robertson a couple of days ago, she was mentioning how she was struggling a little bit as well in the last 10 days, and everything cleared up this week on Monday. So let's hope that Gillian is going to come and arrive and be on weight, even though she had a little bit of difficulty earlier last week.
I don't know how well you can speak this, Aiemann, but it is a lot more difficult for women to cut weight at certain times. I mean, the body chemistry is very different. And they hold water at certain times of the month, of course.
Yes, of course.
And that can make it very difficult for women to cut weight because sometimes it just won't come off.
Yeah, actually, I remember there was, I don't remember if it was an embedded or one of the UFC series or if it was just if it was just Cyborg's, her own behind-the-scenes footage. But I remember when she was cutting weight for a fight, there was a certain point in her camp where the pounds weren't coming off. And I remember she was working with a dietitian named George Lockhart, and he was on the video saying, I told you to take this type of birth control and whatever, and they were arguing and back and forth about the behind-the-scenes footage or something like that. And all of that plays into it. They have something extra that men don't have to deal with, and it does make it a little harder. And we don't know if that could be playing a role for either woman for this fight. And you know, you got to feel for them, but mostly women make weight. I feel like they don't miss weight more often than men either. They find a workaround, and it's very important to hire a good nutritionist. Whether you're a man or a woman, it's important to work with someone like I mentioned, Jourdain or Mike Dolce, or I work with Luigi Melli at LTC Nutrition. But it takes the stress off you, because we're so strict on ourselves, and we want to make weight so much that sometimes we eat less than we should, and then that backfires. Because if you eat too little, you won't lose the weight either. So when you hire a nutritionist and they're doing the math for you, calculating your macros and whatnot, and weighing how much water you're losing during camp every day and whatever, and how much water you're intaking, they can tell you how much to eat. And then you realize, wow, I can eat all this food and still lose weight. And it's surprising, but it makes you feel better. And I think it's worth the cost. And I think everybody on the roster in the UFC, they have the UFC PI who do it for free. So they didn't even have to hire someone outside of the UFC PI. They can work with the UFC, and the UFC will help them get down. Like Charles is amazing. He's like the GOAT nutritionist and coach.
Yeah, and that's why we're seeing a lot of these fighters move to Las Vegas. I think that you look at Andre Fili, I mentioned he recently moved to Las Vegas. Roman Dolidze lives here, and that allows him to take a short notice fight, because a lot of these athletes can now, you know, around the clock use the UFC PI and the dietitian services that they have there in order to make sure that they're constantly monitoring their weight and at their optimal weight for when they A, walk around, and B, when they compete.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And what you need to understand is, yes, so much of it is mental, but if you're not, you want your body to be like a Ferrari. You still want it to be tuned up, and you need to work with the best in the business. And it's so nice that the UFC provides that PI service for us for free. You know, like, and guys that live in Vegas, they go and they get scanned and tested, they get their VO2 max tested, and they get their body tuned up to the T. You know, and that's a great advantage to have. You know, for guys who are not in the UFC, they don't have that luxury. You know, so they got to spend extra money and do all these different things to accommodate. But it's really a luxury to be in the UFC.
Yeah, my body's more like a Pontiac Bonneville. I digress. You look at the different fighters right now. We still have a lot of fighters that are yet to weigh in, which is a little bit unorthodox. Usually I would say that in the first, whatever it is, 15 minutes, you have the majority of the card weigh in. But as I say that, we'll throw it over to John Anik and see who's next.
World title challenger Maida Bueno Silva. .136, the official weight for Maida Bueno Silva.
And we talk about the weight cuts of some of these female fighters. Maida Bueno Silva really turned her career around, moving from flyweight at 125 pounds to now bantamweight 135 pounds, where she recently fought for a championship in Toronto. And I think that has been a great move for her career.
It's interesting how that works. Sometimes you see fighters, they're in the wrong weight class, but they chose too heavy of a weight class. And sometimes some fighters, they chose too light of a weight class. Like I remember Robert Whittaker actually lived with me at TriStar Dorms when I was staying in there. And he was fighting at 170 pounds. And he thought the cut was too much. And then he moved up and found great success at 185.
And now he's talking about potentially going to 205. All right, we've got a guest.
Hey,
Macy, how are you?
How are you? Very good.
We were actually just having this whole conversation about how it can be more difficult for women to make weight than it is for men because of body chemistry. And as we say that, I guess Gillian Robertson's about to make weight, so we'll just throw over to Gillian quickly, and then we'll chat with our guest here.
.116, the official weight for Gillian Robertson.
All right, Gillian Robertson is on weight at 116 pounds. And as I mentioned, we now have Macy Chiasson joining us. She's fighting on the main card against Maida Bueno Silva. We talked about Maida moving up from 125 to 135. You fought as high as 145. Right. So what is the weight cut like, and what are some factors that can come into play?
Well, I mean, I was fighting at 55 as an amateur, so I never thought that I would be a 35er. So, I mean, it takes a lot of discipline out of camp and constant training and just being on point all the time and consistent.
What are some of the tricks that you have? Are there any tricks that you use during the year that help you keep the weight down?
We're also wondering, do you find that it may be different for how a woman cuts weight versus how a man cuts weight?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, women have hormones, right? And which is a blessing and a curse. It's actually really cool. We have a window during our cycle, right? So cycle could be up to 30 days or more, depending on the person. And, you know, right after your cycle finishes, day 6 through day 17 is basically your hormones are at its peak. So you're looking at like a 35% increase in muscle and endurance during that time. So you can kind of like overload on workouts. And then once you kind of get past ovulation and luteal phase is usually where we need to start deloading. So it's kind of cool, you know, we have this like hormonal thing where, you know, we have attributes in a sense, and then, you know, you have a week where you need to deload. Now, let's say I have a weight cut I'm in my luteal phase, right? I'm about to start my cycle. We can hold up to like 6 pounds of water. Wow. So you have to really like be on point with all that and knowing like, if I have a weight cut during this week and I'm going to be in this phase of my cycle, okay, I need to maybe be a little bit lighter, you know, because I'm going to be holding on to a little bit more water.
You seem extremely knowledgeable on this topic, and it shows that you went from 155 to 135,
well,
and you had to kind of do your homework.
Right? Like you as a woman, even as a man, right? Because men, I think testosterone peaks at certain times of the day, and men can do better with fasting and stuff like that. So for women, it's just a little different. You just have to really know what's going on as a woman.
I think that's the most I've learned about women's weight cutting. That
exactly.
in the last
Thank
3
you for
minutes
this
than ever.
lesson.
You're welcome.
You know, she's gonna come out with a DVD on how to cut weight for women.
I've worked with a lot of female. You know, my nutritionist Eric Pena is very knowledgeable in all of that stuff for women. But I've done a lot of studying and work with other people.
I want to ask you, in terms of obviously making the weight.
Yeah.
Would you say you're not at your peak strength when you fight at this weight, but like when you're outside of camp, you're really your strongest, but you give up that strength and power just to be able to be strong enough for the weight class? Or how do you feel
Sorry,
about
Macy,
it?
before you answer, I think we're going to just go to Alex Pereira making weight. Hopefully making weight for the main event of UFC 303, and we'll get right back to you.
.204.5, the official weight for Poatan Alex Pereira.
All right, the champ is on weight at 204.5 pounds. Testament to him and his hard work, taking this fight on short notice and making the weight. All right, so Macy, you've got Mayra Bueno Silva ahead of you on the main card, and she just recently fought for the championship. And it looks like the next title fight is, I found out yesterday, is going to be likely in October. Yeah, Juliana Pena against Raquel Pennington. So, what do you think of how this division is shaking out? A lot of action going on right now.
I think it's really cool how it's kind of like stirring up, you know. There's a new champ since Amanda stepped back, and it's a lot of opportunity for people to really, you know, kind of mix up the division right now and put it in its place.
I want to know your thoughts on how she said she doesn't not respect you, she doesn't respect you, but she doesn't know who you are. How did you take that? Like, I thought it was disrespectful. I mean,
she, you know, I've watched a lot of interviews, and I just, you know, and I mentioned something about her being a mess, and what I meant was just like she's really cocky, you know. I mean, it's almost disrespectful to people who've been fighting in the division for a while, and you know, it's like you don't respect anything that any of these people do. Like, she said she was gonna knock out Raquel, you know, and then that was not what happened
not
at
really
all.
close, but like,
yeah.
do you take it as like a blessing that you're being underestimated? Like for me, when I'm an underdog, I actually like it because I hope they overlook me because I'm coming ready.
Yeah.
You know, I'm coming prepared, and I'm assuming that's how you know you have the
100%
fire for this one Saturday.
How I feel, and how I think. So, you know, and I feel the same way with her. Is like I can't let my guard down with these people. You never know in MMA. Like it really is 50-50 at some point. You know, like anything could happen.
There are so many ways to win and lose, and you never know. And whichever punch is going to be the one that might just change the entire fight. Right?
For sure. Yeah.
Going back to the division, one person that does respect you, Kayla Harrison, I mentioned to her yesterday, she's looking for a contender to fight, and she said if you get the win tomorrow, that you're certainly somebody that she would like to face.
Oh, yeah, that's awesome.
That's great.
That's awesome.
Yeah, people are dropping your name.
Respect, man. I have a lot of respect for these women. You know, they're, you know, especially Kayla and Amanda and all those people, and I mean Rocky. They've been doing it for so long. You know, they're vets, and you know, Kayla, Olympic gold medal. I mean, it's freaking amazing to be able to compete against these people. I mean, it's a blessing. It really is, and it makes me so pumped and excited.
It's a blessing for us to have you here with us today.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate your time. Ultimate Fighter winner, Macy Chiasson. Thanks for doing this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Yep. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, next fighter to the scale, competing in a prelim in the featherweight division, Cub Swanson. 146, the official weight for Killer Cub Swanson.
Cub Swanson, just a pro's pro. I mean, this guy's had 20-plus UFC fights. You're never worried about him making weight. He's always putting his best foot forward, both inside and outside of the cage. And Andre Feely, his opponent, has made weight, and let's see who's next.
The former UFC heavyweight champion, future Hall of Famer, the Pitbull, Andre Arlovsky. .245, the official weight for Andre Arlovsky.
I will say this, as a journalist who covers the sport, we always worry about the heavyweights for weigh-ins because it's a 2-hour window, but these guys just roll out of bed. They can just come whenever they want.
Come whenever.
So oftentimes we're waiting around for, first guys make weight. Everybody's made weight in the first 30 minutes. You're waiting for an hour and 20 minutes for a guy to step on the scale at 240 pounds and make weight seamlessly.
Yeah, I mean, he made weight at 245, so he's 20 pounds under the weight limit, so he doesn't need to rehydrate. He doesn't even have to rush whatsoever. But it's interesting that he's given up almost 20 pounds to his opponent. You know, it's quite a big difference. Like, you don't see that in any other weight class. That's huge in the heavyweight. Like, you can really get a big disparity.
Yeah, and you see guys, I mean, Stipe Miocic was weighing in like the high 230s and was like the champion at heavyweight. So I think a lot of people will take the trade-off if you've got the speed, right?
Yeah.
You get the speed advantage. A lot of these heavyweights, they're 260-plus pounds. They're kind of lumbering. I think that a lot of these heavyweights that are more athletic will take the weight discrepancy. Look at Jourdain Almeida. I mean, Jourdain Almeida's fought at middleweight before. He's fighting at heavyweight now, weighs in sometimes at 220, 225, and because he's so good with his submission skills, as long as he can get a guy down to the ground using his athleticism, he's able to take advantage in a division where submission defense isn't really prioritized.
Oh, yeah, 100%. Like, if you look at the submission defense or offense, compare the 125-pounders to the heavyweights, there's a big discrepancy there, and you see a lot of action at 125.
I think our producer, Dan, keeps forgetting that we're a Canadian show. He's bringing all these guys that are fighting all the Canadians, but we've got Joe Bodybags Pyfer joining us. Thank you so much for joining us.
How are you?
Very good.
Nice to meet you.
Good. Nice to
Nice
meet
to
you.
see
Nice to meet you.
All right. So, Joe, I mean, the big question I have for you is, when you have a fight like your last one, you learn so much from that experience. So what was your biggest takeaway?
I just think, getting my feet wet, going my first 5 rounds, and, handling some adversity leading up to the fight, dealing with some injuries, being sick, and still pulling through to the fight, and still being able to perform the way that I did, not getting finished by a guy who has 17 UFC fights, and being very competitive with him. You know what I mean? I lost by 1 fight, but yeah, I'm ultimately very grateful for it.
Absolutely. Well, this is a great opponent for you in Marc-Andre Barriault. Before we get to that, let's just take a look at Brian Ortega here at the scale for the co-main event. This fight has now moved to lightweight. We'll see how Brian looks on the scale.
.155, the official weight for Brian Ortega.
All right, so Brian Ortega makes weight at 155 pounds. So as I was saying, Marc-Andre Barriault, I think this is a matchup that you really will appreciate. A guy that's always going to be in there. He's a gritty fighter. He's going to be in your face for the entire duration of the fight. What did you think when his name ended up in front of you?
I mean, I said yes immediately. I know I've been a fan of the UFC and still am a fan of the UFC. So I've been watching him for a couple of years now, and yeah, I mean, I think he's a tough guy, like you said. I think he's a good dude. Hearing him talk about men's mental health is a good thing. I like to hear that. So it's not hard to fight a guy like this. I don't have any ill will towards him, but I do have bad intentions for him, and I think that this is a great style matchup for me, in particular, rather than for him.
In your last fight, you showed really impressive boxing. Your left hook was landing, especially early. I actually thought that he may have gone out in the first round. You just landed so often. And, you're also known for your wrestling. Your wrestling's so good. Are we going to see more of a mix of the two, or do you want to favor one over the other for this matchup?
No, I think you're definitely going to see a good blend. I need to be a complete mixed martial artist, right? Like, I have devastating power, clearly, but I had really good moments in the first 2 rounds against Jack because I was throwing combinations and I was moving. And then there was a time where I got hit in the eyeball and I just couldn't see him as well anymore. So then that led to me just getting my leg chopped up and my face jabbed off. I couldn't see. Versus a guy like Mark, I think he's shown some errors in the wrestling department. And I think he has good cardio if he's only allowed to kickbox. So I'm going to give him a good puzzle to solve, man. I got a lot of respect for the guy. just literally recently, just because of hearing him talk about men's mental health, I think he's a good dude. But I'm going to go in there and I'm going to mix it up, and I'm going to punch him hard.
Yeah. In the end of the day, it's a sport, right?
Yeah.
We're going to get a paycheck. We all want to be the best. Everyone's here is trying to be the best. We all want the belt. We all want to move up the rankings. So it's nice to see that you have no ill will, but that doesn't take away from going out there and try to get a finish, right? We're going out there, we're putting on a show, and we want that 50 Gs, am I right?
I'm here getting 50 Gs, and I'm here to hurt this man and put a stop to it, He's not my friend in there. I'm cool. I'm a respectful dude, I think, for the most part.
So.
But, at the end of the day, he's trying to take my check. He's trying to take my food away. And, I'm coming for him. So
yeah, so we're excited to watch you fight. Thank you for coming on here, and it was great to talk to you.
I don't know if you know this, Aiemann. This man broke Francis Ngannou's record for the hardest punch.
I know. That's why I thought he was going to knock out Jack.
I did that with a torn shoulder. I wasn't supposed to do that. Yeah, because I was out there getting some rehab for my shoulder from the PI. And I wish that they had pushed that fight a little bit back further, but the things that I've learned from taking that loss, it's not like I got knocked out or dropped or submitted or anything like that, but going 5 rounds against a guy like Jack, who's also very respectful, couldn't ask for a better, loss.
Fights can always be worse. Even me, like my first time I got KO was Madison Square Garden, and I was doing well up to then, and I got knocked out. It is what it is. Losing is just a part of growing, and don't let that hinder you. It's just a little, like one Israel Adesanya said it best, we're just stopping for gas, and we're going to keep going. If you want to get out of the car now, get out now.
That's right.
But you know what? Joe Pyfer is here to stay.
Thank you.
One last question. Yeah. Now that the shoulder's repaired, have you done another do-over? See if you could break your own record?
No, not yet. I'm going to. I promise I will. The turd that was at the PI didn't want to fucking give me my... I don't like that dude, but he didn't want to give me my props for breaking it the first time. I'm going to hit it again. And I saw Pereira beat mine. But I want to try it. Why not? I'm definitely still one of the hardest hitting guys. Obviously Pereira's a lot bigger than me. But I think I can beat it. So I would like to hit it with a healthy shoulder and be full size. Like then I was only like 205, 210.
And Ngannou's bigger than you too, and you beat him.
Yeah. See, I like that Joe Pyfer still finding motivation, even carnival game type stuff, trying to break that record. I like that. Well, everybody should be Joe Pyfer. Appreciate you, man. Thank you for doing this.
Thank you, man. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Awesome. So one thing I should mention, Ricky Simone made weight 136 pounds. That happened during one of our interview with Macy, and then we had, that happened during our interview with Joe, and Giannis Gamuri made weight earlier, I believe, when we were speaking with either Michelle or Macy at 136 pounds. So no weight misses thus far at UFC 303, but we still have, let's count them. I've got it right. Let's count it right here in real time. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 fighters left to step on the scale. Those fighters are Peyton Talbott, John Silva, Ian Machado Gary, Anthony Smith, and Jiri Prochazka, the title challenger. So that's who we're still waiting on here at UFC 303 at the official weigh-ins. And any takeaways from those interviews? Or
we have Andre Barriault coming up right now.
Power Bar stepping in.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, merci. Good to see
Thank
you.
Thank you for doing this.
Yes,
Appreciate it. We just spoke to your opponent, actually, just a minute ago.
Yeah,
Joe Pyfer.
yeah.
And he's very motivated, but he says he respects you a lot. And the way that you speak about men's mental health, he said, is something that he really respects about you.
Oh, really? Okay. Oh, I didn't know. But, when they asked me yesterday about all the mental aspect, I spoke with my heart. That's a real cause that I want to speak for. So, I'm very excited about the matchup, about how my camp, my life went right now. So really looking forward to that fight. Yeah.
Why is that important to you, men's mental health? What can you tell us about your mental health journey?
I mean, it's just like overall, we are all human beings. So even though like we're athletes, behind the athletes there's always a human. So I want to put like more the human side part of the the thing. And for me, like I want to be the power bar, but most importantly, I'm Marc, and I want to drive this guy for the best. So that's why.
Before coming here, I was watching his tape to be ready to ask you some questions.
Okay.
And one thing that I noticed about his last fight is he started very strong. He was landing those left hooks, and we all thought maybe Jack was going to go down because he's a very powerful puncher.
Yeah.
But he didn't wrestle very much early until he started losing the fight a little bit. I was wondering if in your game plan for this fight was to get him moving backwards, because when we saw him move backwards, he couldn't strike as well and he couldn't defend as well. And we know that you're a cardio machine and you're extremely tough and durable, and it could be something that you may have thought of for this fight.
Yes, absolutely. We watch a lot of mostly his last fight, because there was 5 rounds against like a top 15 guy. So I know he's gonna come hard. You know, the first round. He's a power puncher, like heavy, like wrestler too. I think he's gonna try to, you know, test me in every aspect.
If you have to put money, you put it on Marc-Andre by KO.
This is our gambling expert, Charles Jourdain, popping in.
So yeah, no, I know he's gonna be like well prepared, for sure. For my part, I'm the power bar, so more the fight goes, more you know, I'm getting comfortable. But I need to make sure that I'm on point right away because, like you said, he's gonna come hard.
He's a fast starter.
I know.
He's
yes.
a fast starter. And in your last fight, it took a little bit longer for you to get going. And that fight was super close. You know, you could have argued that it could have went either way.
Absolutely.
And, you know, for this fight, with him being so powerful so early, you know, it'd be good if you know, maybe had a strong start as well and then pushed through because it looked like he got tired in that 5 rounds. And you're not known to get tired.
No, absolutely. So yeah, I just want to make sure that, you know, I'm ready to go right away and, you know, use my strength, you know, right away. Don't wait too much to like turn the fight to my advantage. I just want to be like myself, be aware, good eyes, make sure that you know, he's gonna respect my power too, you know, right in the beginning. So that's why that's gonna probably be one of the best fight of the night for sure. Yeah.
Marc, thank you for doing this. I've got Charles standing by, and his opponent just missed weight, so I'd like to get a live reaction from him on that. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
All the best
Appreciate
for
you
this
doing
Saturday.
this.
We're rooting for you on
Yeah,
Sportsnet.
I know. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, Charles, we'll have you come up.
How much did he weigh? How much did he miss weight by?
He missed weight by 1.5 pounds at 147.5 pounds. You were in a much better mood a second ago, but wanted to get your live reaction to your opponent, Jean Silva, missing weight by 1.5 pounds.
I'm a fucking idiot. I mean, all that talk, all everything. Like, you need to be a professional when you fight in UFC, and 1 pound can be a drastic point in terms of rehydration. But hey,
Of course, he's way less depleted than you now.
yeah, I'm
Right.
energized. I'm good. I've never felt like, look at this. Look at the chocolate bar.
Look
my
at this,
God.
man.
Go down, more, more.
I
You
mean,
see
I
this?
mean, yeah,
This
you
is
look,
a
you look.
professional who did weight. No, I'm pissed by that, but it's part of the sport.
I find it
20%
interesting.
of your purse is gonna go in my pocket.
Yeah, or maybe even more. You never know. You can ask for 30.
Yeah, I think
Just so
we're
you know, a
gonna-
little vet tip there. But
you.
usually, the guys who miss weight shouldn't come in before 11. They should.
No,
They should
fuck,
take.
you
Even he
still
has
have a-
time. He
you
has
guys-
time to go back.
Absolutely, you still have an hour to do the weight. You're a professional. You showed up. I'm very. I think it's very disrespectful, not only for me as his opponent, but for the promotion. UFC is giving you the chance to fight in the biggest stage of the world, and you arrive, and you still have an hour to cut, and you cannot do it. That's.
We were
Anyway,
talking
it's
earlier
like-
because the UFC fighters have access to the UFC PI and the UFC team to help you make weight
Yes.
for your fights, right? And
Yes.
it's free. And it would be interesting to know if whether or not he used those resources.
Absolutely, I did, and I did good.
Oh yeah, you used them. How was your
Always.
experience with them?
Oh, wonderful! It's my 14th fight with UFC, and I always did the rehydration, everything with them, the cut, and they're amazing.
So you see, guys, a testament of what I was saying earlier
Yes,
today.
sir.
He's proving the point. And you know what? We always know you come to show up to fight. And now, does this him missing weight give you that extra motivation to leave an exclamation mark and be more motivated to finish him Saturday?
Oh yeah, I'll destroy this guy. I'm mad at this, but I cannot be. Emotion cannot speak during the fight. It's all about how you performed in the gym and the strategy, and the strategy will be applied, and I will take him out.
You let it out now, right?
Hmm?
Let the emotion out now.
Oh yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Right, this is why I'm. Yeah, right now I'm stiff, but
Yeah.
go back, breathe, acknowledge the fact that we might gonna leave with more of his purse. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
So yeah.
And usually when a fighter comes in at this time and weighs that much over, they're probably not going to make a second attempt. It's just from what I've seen in my experience.
So stupid. 1 pound. 1 pound. Like, go on the treadmill, go outside. It's 42 degrees here in Las Vegas.
Yeah.
And they don't even take the time. If it was 10:59, I would understand. But you still have an hour and you present yourself like a moron like this. That's life.
We don't want to get you too down and whatever, but
it's okay.
I still think that regardless, the game plan is going to be the game plan, whether
Yes.
or not he makes weight. And hopefully you get that extra 30.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much.
What is the game plan for a guy like Jean Silva?
It's to fight linear, because he's a guy who's very good with circular punches, and he likes to loop, he likes to jump on his strikes. So if I keep it linear, I can tag him before he can reach with that circular motion, because every time you throw straight, you have more of a reach than when you throw like this, even though this can generate more power because you're forcing yourself in it. Conor McGregor's left hand is a big representative of that. Let's say against Jose Aldo, he went in with a left hook, leaping left, and boom, the straight hit first. So it's all about keeping it linear. I've been fighting some very tall guys recently, so now having a 5'7" guy is gonna be fun.
And this is your first fight with a reach advantage in a while, actually.
I did, but they measured my weight when I was 23. My reach is better now.
Oh, really? You're still growing.
Yeah,
Look at this guy.
All right, Charles. I always appreciate your time. Thank you for reacting in real time to your opponent missing weight, and hopefully
Appreciate your
you
time.
do get
Thank
that extra 30% for taking this fight.
50, yeah,
50%.
Go negotiate.
We're going to change the
Show them
commission
Canadian
rules.
negotiations.
To get 50%. That's Charles Jourdain. Now, I wanted to mention to you, we've talked to a lot of these athletes so far today, and they're keeping their game plan close to death. Charles gives you the exact blueprint for what he wants to do.
Yeah,
What,
you know,
what do you think of that?
I think it's a testament to his confidence, and because when you're willing to tell people what you're going to do and you go out there and you still execute it, it just shows how many reps you've done in the gym, and you don't care what anybody knows. And some of the best fighters in the UFC, we all knew what they were going to go out there and do, and GSP is one of them, right? Everyone knew he was going to jab and Superman punch, and then eventually score that takedown, pass your guard, and ground and pound all night. But guys could not stop him. He would not be denied. And maybe Charles is moving down that path as well.
Yeah, 147.5 pounds for Gian Silva, the only guy so far who has missed weight, and we are still awaiting Peyton Talbott, Ian Machado-Gary, and Jiri Prochazka to make weight for UFC. Oh, and Anthony Smith as well to make weight for UFC 303. Did I say Anthony Smith twice? Maybe I did.
Maybe he did. But you know one
either
thing
way.
I want to talk about, like, I don't know if you can see the time right there, but it's surprising that he came early and missed weight. Like, I agree with Charles. It doesn't make sense. If he came at 10:59 and missed weight, we understand. But 1.5 pounds, it's not that much weight. And I don't think this fight was booked short notice.
It was not.
It was not booked short notice. So it's reasonable to say, why didn't he take the remaining time and spend it in the sauna, jogging, or in the bath to try to lose that 1.5 pounds?
No, I won't say this, given that I'm just a reporter, but a lot of fighters I've heard have said that person's already kind of broken. They've already lost the first battle in terms of the fight.
Yeah, I mean, if he...
We might get another live reaction. We've got MVP standing by with Ian Gary getting on the scale.
Welterweight contender still undefeated, Ian Machado-Gary. $170, the official weight for Ian Machado-Gary.
All right, Ian Machado-Gary makes weight at 170 pounds. We're still awaiting Peyton Talbott, Anthony Smith, and Jiri Prochazka, and now we're joined by the man who will open the main card against the man we just saw step on the scale, Michael Benampage. Thank you so much for doing this. Appreciate you. So your opponent just got on the scale, made weight 170 pounds. Your thoughts?
Slightly under, and he tends to not put too much weight back on. So I'm happy.
That's good to hear. So how do you feel after yesterday's press conference? Are you riled up more, or is it all the same and didn't bother you whatsoever?
No, you know what? It's all fun and games, man. I say fun and games. I don't take it too seriously. I don't take it too personally. I've got a job to do here.
Yeah.
I'm focused, fixated on exactly what I need to do. Have a bit of fun for the people watching to stay tuned in. And then let me do my job.
Yeah, it actually made kind of sense, because even backstage we saw the video of you going there and saying hello to his son and being all friendly.
Yeah.
It's funny, but most MMA guys, people don't know, are very kid friendly. They love families. They love kids.
I'm sorry, I have to say his kid is cute as hell. He's got a very, very cute child, and that's literally what I said as I was walking by. He was still in his energy. He was still in his mode. Like, yeah, I'm gonna do this to you Saturday. I was like, oh, cute kid. He's like, yeah, come and say hello. Like, so yeah, and like I said, I can't take this side too seriously, because that's not what's most important. There's a bit of a verbal battle and stuff, and we kind of try and test each other to see, if anything's shaking, if I can see some hesitation, some nerves. Yeah. But the most important part is what happens in the cage.
Yeah, and you're both testing each other with your banter, and you're both actually accusing the other one of not having any confidence.
Exactly. So I think we're both known for having confidence. Yeah. So that's undeniable. So it's just about the performance on Saturday.
Yeah. Well, it's something of a misnomer, I think, in mixed martial arts, where everybody thinks there has to be this animosity all the time. But we're human beings, right? Like, one day I'll be driving, a guy cuts me off, and I'm angry, and then 2 minutes later, a song comes on that I like, and I'm happy. We got to remember that we've got ebbs and flows to life. It's not all about having warfare all the time. You got to be able to turn it off at points.
It's interesting, because my experience with combat is very different, because it's very family oriented. So I grew up having to punch my older sister, having to spar my brothers. So it's very different. And, you know, we used to be on the mat. My dad would say, you know, on the mat, you guys are not family. The second the fight is finished, make sure you guys hug, kiss, make sure everyone's in, you know, everyone's good, everyone's looked after. So if I can do that and spar with my siblings, I don't have to be angry to spar you. You know, we can fight in a drop of a hat. So yeah, I don't need the whole animosity. I find it fun, and I find it entertaining, but I don't need the actual emotional anger to go and do what I need to do.
And the emotions could play against you if you're too angry.
Very,
you know,
very true.
Actually, it was brought up before, but Jose Aldo versus Conor McGregor. Jose was so angry. He threw that punch with so much animosity and so much hate that he was blinded, and, you know, the punch got caught. Right? So we don't want you to be too angry, but we enjoy the gamesmanship. The gamesmanship is what sells the fights, and you're very good at selling the fight, especially with your last performance, how well you moved in the octagon. And people were wondering, because you fought in the other promotions, and they don't have as much media and as much press conferences and the style of show that UFC puts on, has it hindered you in a way, or has it made you nervous, or is it just all the same for you?
No, it's all the same. Even you know, when I actually got to the other promotions, I had done quite a few big, nowhere near the same scale, but quite a few big kickboxing events. So I was just used to being on stage, used to being under the lights. You can see the levels, you know, especially here now at the UFC, especially experience it. There is definitely levels to it, and this is the top of the top. But I'm still the same. It doesn't faze me in that way. I feel good.
The hardest part about selling you here is they don't have the rights to your Bellator highlights. That, I think, is... I mean, if they could just show those, they don't even need you on stage.
We're getting
just show the highlight reel.
To be fair, I'm actually excited to start a fresh slate. So it just means I got to work for some new highlights.
You know,
hopefully Saturday.
When I watched your last fight, it was interesting because not only were you out striking him, but you even scored takedowns on him. You know, and this fight with Ian Gary, who's also a striker, is it possible that we might see you get him with some trips and just score points in that sense, as well as like not only beating him with striking, because that, you know, it's very possible that you do, because you're one of the best strikers in the world. But can you throw him for a loop and trip him every once in a while and get him thinking about two things instead of just one?
Yeah, 100%. You have to be, you know, adaptive to the whole game of MMA. And don't get me wrong, I always like to work on the takedowns that I work on. It's very cheap. I call it cheap takedowns. Lazy ones, like foot sweeps, things like a lot of the judokas would do. But it works well for me. You know, I don't have to exert too much energy doing it. And, you know, I remain on my feet, remain in the, you know, the best place. And if it doesn't work, I'm still in a safe position. So, yeah, I really enjoy those type of that style of you know, trips or takedowns, should I say?
Yeah, because they're very efficient. Because if you miss, it's no big deal. And
exactly.
if you get it, it's really surprises everyone.
Exactly.
And I'm a big fight fan, of course. And I was so happy to see you score them. It was very entertaining.
Thank you.
And I heard that maybe you were training with DC. And who's helping you with your wrestling and your takedowns, preparing you for like the top guys in the category who do wrestle heavy?
Yeah, we got a lot of wrestlers. What I like about the game, we do get a lot of cross sparring, a lot of guys that will come to the gym, and some of us will go to other gyms. You know, we was with Chimaev in Dubai. We brought so many, I don't want to name everyone, but we brought so many different wrestlers in, and dealing with them is a handful. But also get a gauge of where you are. Sometimes we will just wrestle. You know, sometimes we'll bring top jiu-jitsu guys in, and we're just doing jiu-jitsu. And my coach is always like, I need to put you in a deep end in areas that you may end up in, and you need to make sure, you know, you can find your way. Worst comes to worst, it's just finding your way route out safely and not getting caught. And that's what we do.
Something that we do at our gym is that if, let's say, a guy has a specialty, we start at the very end, at the worst position. And then as camp goes, we're working our way out, and then we'll start less deep in that submission, let's say, or that takedown, and then get out to, eventually we work to prevention and avoidance, complete avoidance. But we start with getting out. What's the route out? So it seems like that's something you're into?
Yeah, 100%. You have to, I can't completely just be avoidant, because there are times where mistakes may happen and I just end up in those positions, and I need to be able, as you say, you need to be able to work your way out of it. Or always say work your way back to the road. So I have a path that I want to take in a fight. Sometimes you go off, you know, off route, or, you know, go off road, but you just got to figure out your way back to the road and then continue, and that's it.
I'm thinking right out the gate, maybe power double. Let's throw him for a loop.
Catch him out.
Really, he's not going to be expecting that whatsoever, let me tell you.
I'll keep that in mind.
Keep that one in your back pocket. MVP, thank you for doing this with us. Appreciate you.
It's a pleasure to talk to you. See you soon.
All right, he's opening up the main card against Ian Machado Gary, who just recently made weight at 170 pounds, and we await Peyton Talbott, Anthony Smith, and Jiri Prochazka as the final three to step on the scale during this weigh-in window.
It's great to hear about someone who's such a specialist like MVP, who takes wrestling and grappling very seriously, and that his coaches want to work on his weaknesses in camp. Because, you know, some guys, they just want to work on what is offensive for them, and they just want to keep sharpening their offensive tools because they're just so focused on getting a finish, and they don't really cover their weaknesses. And George St. Pierre is a mentor of mine, and that's something I always saw him work in camps. In camps, he would bring in the best of what can represent his opponents, and he'd start from the worst case scenario, and then he'd build himself out, and by the end of training camp, he'd be working on complete prevention. So we'd start from like completely stuck in a position to let's not get there whatsoever. Because at this level at the UFC, everyone is so good. Everyone is a specialist, and you have to expect that. Let's say the guy's a back taker, or the guy's got an amazing right hand, that he's gonna land it or get you in that sticky situation at least one time in the fight. You know, at least one time, because he's also a superstar. He's also really, really good, just as good as you are at what you do. So you have to always plan for the worst, but hope for the best.
And one thing I always loved about George was how he went to all of these different places. He was very nomadic. But, of course, TriStar was his home base, but he'd go with Crewfield Nurse. He would go with Freddie Roach. For jiu-jitsu, with Donaher. Like, you know, he used to always just seek out the places where he could find the best people in certain dialects and test himself in that way. I just always admired that.
Yeah, it's incredible. And he was the fighter that I've seen spend the most money on training camp. And at the time, he wasn't making as much money. Like with his first few title fights, they weren't big, huge paydays, right? The more he won, the more he defended his belt, the more money he made. But from the very beginning, he spent a lot of money. And he saw it as a reinvestment in himself, and that the better he got, the better he can do and the more money he would make. So he never thought about nickel and diming himself. He always like, okay, how can I get better? What would it cost? And when he would bring these guys in, he'd put them up at hotels. He'd give them per diem, and he treated them so well that they were all so happy to give him a lot. You know, you don't want to be a fighter who, when you do bring in a guy, you don't take care of them. You know, you don't pay for their meals. You don't pay for their hotel. Like, you got to make sure that you take care of these guys properly so that they give you everything and they don't hold anything back and they don't resent you for spending the time, because they can be spending the time working on themselves. You know what I mean? They're spending time away from their families. So that's something that I learned from George, that how he took care of his friends that came out from United States or from wherever around the world to help him. I use that myself, and I feel like that's something a lot of these new fighters need to learn and make sure that they spend their money on themselves.
In fact, Conor McGregor, when I spoke to him before his Cowboy Cerrone fight, said that one thing that really impacted him was he saw how much money LeBron James spent of his salary on training and on preparation, and that was something that he really wanted to subscribe to, was really investing in himself and making sure that he was a well-oiled machine going into some of these fights. Of course, we're not getting a chance to see him tomorrow night, but that was something that always stood out to me, that he was thinking of things in that way.
Yeah, because we are the business. You know what I mean? The MMA fighter is a business in itself, right? So, you know, we're paying our managers, we're paying the membership fees for your gym, you're paying your coaches, you have all these different things. So you can expense these things, right? So if you're spending money on yourself, you know, instead of paying taxes, you're spending money on growing, and then eventually the checks are only going to get bigger. The better you do, the bigger the checks, right? So you should take it and invest the money in something that propels you even further than just paying taxes. I pay all my taxes, by the way. Every penny I pay it. But, you know, I do try to take advantage. Like my last camp, I brought in Ton Lee, Ryan Hall, Jonathan DeBella, which is a local, but he still came out to help me. I also brought in Said Jakub Kakramanov. I brought in all these guys. Why? Because I needed that edge. And I took care of them. You know, I put them up at hotels, and I paid for their food, and I made sure that they had a wonderful time in Montreal. Why? Because I want them to give me the best knowledge they have. Actually, it's a really interesting story is that for us, my brother and I had a game plan for the Javid fight, and we did it for 5 weeks. And then when Ton Lee came, and he was amazing at mimicking Javid because he has a Taekwondo background, and he's an elite striker. And when I asked him to mimic him, he did it, and he found a hole in my game plan, and I changed the game plan 2.5 weeks before the fight. So maybe I would have lost my last fight if I didn't bring him in.
All right, well,
right here in the middle.
George is on a roll this week, so let's continue that roll. We got Roman Dolidze joining us right now. We're still awaiting your opponent, Anthony Smith, to get on the scales. Has anybody said anything to you about how he's looking?
I don't know nothing about it, but I hope he will make weight. And I don't know, I don't hear nothing about the situation. You first telling me that, but I hope he's well, and fight will be on.
Well, I don't get me wrong, I haven't heard anything wrong yet, but we are at the top of the hour. He's got an hour left to weigh in, so maybe he's just rolling out of bed a little bit late. Who knows?
I think no problem. I think it'll be good.
Now, I mentioned when you weighed in that you're normally a middleweight, but at the same time, you're still probably walking around at a point where you probably had to cut about 20 pounds for this fight. Is that right?
No, not 20 pounds. I think it was like 10, 12 pounds. And also, Vegas is very hot nowadays. And when I came back here, I lost a lot of weight. That's why it was not so hard.
You leave Extreme Couture, walk to your car, and you've lost 10 pounds right there.
Yeah, almost like that, if you walk especially.
So I mentioned your team, Georgia, doing phenomenally right now in the Euro Cup. What's it been like? Have you been able to enjoy that while you're preparing for a fight?
You know, it was a media day for me when they won over Portugal. And I was walking with phone, just watching how much is going. And it's a historical big win for Georgia. No, we never thought that we can go so far in European Championship, and whole country is celebrating. Nobody is sleeping, and it's like big thing for us, definitely.
Our producer Dan's Portuguese, and he said, "No way we're having Roman on this week." But I talked him out of it. I made sure that we could have you on today.
Yeah, he told me that congratulations win over Portugal. My team, I said, I feel for you. I'm sorry. Georgia is Georgia.
Georgia's also on a roll in the UFC. It looks like two of the upcoming title challengers. You know, we've got Merab Dvalishvili, and of course we've got the champion Ilya Topuria. They're probably going to be fighting in the next couple of months. What's it been like to see them raise the Georgian flag at the championship level?
I think Ilya is a very good, talented fighter, very young. He have a very big, bright future. And if we're talking about Merab deserved to fight for this title for a long time ago. That's why I think he's pushing everybody to give him this title, and he deserves it 100%.
Excellent. Well, what's it like taking a fight like this? Like, was there any hesitation on your part to take a fight like this on short notice?
No, nothing. I didn't even thought 1 second when they offered me fight. So of course, yes, especially with opponent like this big name. He's ranked number 10, and I want to be ranked in 2 weight class.
Well, we're very happy that we get the opportunity to watch you fight this weekend. We weren't expecting it. So thank you for doing this with us, and best luck against Anthony Smith. Hopefully he gets on the scale very soon.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, that's Roman Dolidze. He is fighting Anthony Smith on the main card. And that fight's been a shifting embryo, so to speak, from where it started to where it ended up. We had the co-main event, Jamal Hill, former light heavyweight champion, against Khalil Roundtree Jr. Roundtree Jr. unfortunately had an issue with a supplement that he took, that they had tested and found out that it was a tainted supplement.
Yeah, and he didn't hide behind anything.
Hide it,
he brought it to their attention himself,
yeah,
actually.
Yeah, right. He actually found out about it. Sorry, it actually had
a product in it.
DHEA in it,
Yes,
which
that's
is
correct.
something that Lyoto Machida actually got suspended for back in the day.
Okay.
It's a substance that doesn't really have very high performance enhancing qualities either, DHEA. It's like a fish oil, if I'm not mistaken, or something along those lines.
I'm not sure, but if they banned
It's a
it, they
banned
banned it.
substance,
You know,
it's a banned
and
substance for some reason.
I commend him for bringing it up to them.
Yeah,
You know,
absolutely.
he brought it up to them. They didn't catch him. He showed it to them. And even yesterday, he was talking about it on the red carpet. He was owning everything about it, and he's taking his suspension like a man. And I think that's the right way to go about it.
Yeah, absolutely. He probably could have not reported it at all and hope for the best. But I think that when you do that, you get a suspension that's a lot less than would otherwise be. But yeah, very forthright about it. So it wasn't a tainted supplement. You're right. It was him realizing that there was DHEA, and he uses a personalized supplement company. And I guess that something slipped through the cracks there, unfortunately. But hopefully we see him back soon. Very exciting fighter. And either way, you know, him being pulled from that fight, we then saw Jamal Hill subsequently get injured. So he pulls out of the fight. And then we end up with Carlos Alberg. Carlos Alberg replaced Roundtree.
Yeah.
This is how many
switches. But
yeah, it's been a real carousel.
You know,
so,
it's testament to the UFC matchmakers
thing,
who just keep finding these guys willing to take these fights on short
The
notice.
funny thing about this card is that, like, there haven't been that many changes to the totality of the fights. It's just been the main and co-main event. Of course, losing McGregor and Chandler is such a big deal. But then that co-main event shifts so many times. It goes from Roundtree to Alberg, then Smith steps in for Jamal Hill when he gets injured, then Alberg has to pull out, and now finally we're left with Anthony Smith taking on Roman Dolidze, who we just chatted with. So
it's a pleasure to have Anthony Smith, not left with him.
Well, no, I understand. But what I mean is, like, in the last 2 weeks, like, now suddenly this whole fight shifts, which is interesting. And that might be why we haven't seen Anthony hit the scales yet, is because he took this fight on fairly short notice.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, I think yesterday he seemed very game to fight, though.
100%.
You know, I don't know if weight is going to be necessarily an issue. Maybe he's just using the maximum time to do it the most comfortably possible. I mean, he wants it to be comfortable. I'm sure he doesn't want to rush it too much. But he seemed very game. He was speaking like he's going in there to win Saturday. He's not coming in there to just be lunch meat. You know what I mean? And Dolidze is a very tough striker. He's got very powerful strikes, a dangerous guy. And, you know, Anthony Smith might surprise us. You know, taking this short notice, he might turn things around and make it a great fight like the last one. I wasn't expecting him to win guillotine first round.
Right.
You know, he's a very entertaining fighter, and you don't know, how, you know, how he can surprise you in there.
And Smith is the underdog, and I think that's a role that he relishes in these fights.
Yeah, I think it's better almost because he's got no pressure whatsoever. He took this fight on on short notice, and there's absolutely no pressure on him, and the pressure's on Dolidze for this one.
Roman's a big guy.
Big, strong boy.
And
the Georgians are on a hot streak, not only in soccer, but like you mentioned in the UFC. And maybe that's playing to him. Maybe it helps in his belief, you know, because you only fight as good as your self-image. So if you really believe in yourself and your team and everything that's going around you and you're doing the proper things, you can really fight to your maximum capacity. But if you have a weaker self-image, it can play a role, you know. And everything's going so well around him right now that maybe, you know, he's going to be on a high Saturday.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's a great fight. I think even stylistically, we're in for a treat with that one. So why don't we look at some of these fights? We got the main event, Alex Pereira. We're still awaiting Jiri Prochazka II make weight. Assuming that goes okay, it will be for the light heavyweight championship of the world. When you look at this matchup, how do you think it'll be different from the first time that these guys fought?
Well, if shamans don't show up today, if all the spirits don't come in today, maybe Jiri's got a better chance. I think it's going to be good. I like the fact that Jiri's not hung up on the loss, and that he's taken this fight as a completely one-off. You know what I mean? It's just Saturday. Nothing before it matters, nothing after it's going to matter. He's coming with a pure mind. He's not bringing any emotion to it. He's a very spiritual guy, but I feel like he's coming concentrated, and he really believes that he can get a finish this weekend.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to this one because these are two, honestly, of the most exciting fighters that we've seen in the UFC in a long, long time. And matching them up together, I mean, it's one of those kind of can't miss fights. I just don't see how, barring some sort of freak injury, knock on wood, that this fight won't absolutely deliver the goods.
Well, of course, he's an action-packed guy, Jiri, and so is Alex Pereira. He's always delivering knockouts. And Jiri's someone who can take damage, right? He can take punches and keep coming, and the fight can keep going on for a long time. I'm hoping, though, that this time around, Jiri becomes more defensively responsible, because a lot of times he fights with his hands a little bit lower and he takes more shots than he necessarily should. And with Pereira, you don't want to give him any free shots whatsoever, because you don't know which one's going to put you out or put you on your knees and he gets a finish. I would really like to see if Jiri can take him down. I remember we spoke about it earlier in the week, Aaron, and you said that if Jiri comes with a game plan where he would put Pereira on his back, maybe he can fatigue him and really grind him out. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's certainly a possibility. This fight has almost infinite possibilities.
Yeah.
You've got so many different ways that this fight can go. I personally think that Jiri's best path is to try to get this to the ground. I mean, it's easy to say against Alex Pereira because that's what I think a lot of people's game plans are. But when you have a guy like Jiri who's got a striking base, the takedowns come a little bit easier because you can do them at a time where it's not as expected. Like if you're against a wrestler and you're Alex Pereira, you're training wrestling. But I think that Jiri, we saw him against Glover Teixeira and all of those crazy grappling scrambles. That was one of, I think, the best fights that we've ever seen in the UFC is Jiri Prochazka against the mentor of Alex Pereira, Glover Teixeira, because it was such a volatile roller coaster of a fight. And I think that if Jiri can turn this fight into that, that's where I think he can really shine, because Alex Pereira, while he is used to some volatility in his fights, I think if he goes into wild man mode and can figure out a way to find little errors that Alex makes, that's where I think he'll be able to find takedowns and be able to find submissions. But at the same time, Alex Pereira has that great equalizer with that left hook that can just put anybody out at any time.
I find it very interesting when you bring up errors, because, you know, when it comes to fighting, there's either the guy does an unforced error or you force him to make an error. And when it comes to striking, I really don't see Pereira making an error that's unforced. He has so many kickboxing fights. He has so much experience on his feet. And, you know, he's fearless in there when it comes to exchanging blows. So, really, if he does what you're saying, Jiri, and makes his fight more of a scrambly fight up and down, you know, and really makes him tentative about the takedown, that he will be able to force errors out of Pereira when he's thinking maybe, oh, Jiri might be shooting out, he might be hitting him in the head, or he fakes a shot to the head and he shoots a takedown. Then he can maybe start to see those blemishes in Alex Pereira's game. But if he just goes strictly in the striking, I don't think he's going to force an error out of Pereira, because he's got just so much experience in there. And I feel like, in my opinion, Jiri may have the advantage in terms of wrestling grappling, even though he's a striking base.
Well, we're 10 minutes past the hour. We have 50 minutes left for the last three athletes to weigh in. We've got Peyton Talbott, Anthony Smith, and Jiri Prochazka that we're awaiting. And if you are just joining us, one of the big stories so far today is that the co-main event between Diego Lopez and Brian Ortega has been shifted to the lightweight division. And I think that if we had any concerns about some of these short notice main card fights, perhaps giving us a diminished product because of them taking it on short notice, I actually like that this fight's at lightweight versus featherweight. And while it doesn't have as much of an impact on the title picture, I still think that if Diego Lopez does get a win against Brian Ortega, he will rise in the featherweight rankings, regardless of this fight being at 55.
Yeah, I don't think it really matters, because everyone knows the only reason why they're doing it is because they got it on short notice. So I think they should picture it as a featherweight fight. And actually, like you're saying, it could be good that they're doing it at lightweight. It actually might give us more action because these fighters won't be depleted Saturday night. You know, they're not worried about rehydrating. They're in pretty good shape already because they didn't have to go all the way down to 145, and they may be able to take punches better. They might even be stronger because when you cut all the way down,
right.
I'm just
you're further diminishing a diminished product.
Exactly. So right now, I'm just expanding on your point that we're gonna have a much better fight. These guys fighting at lightweight than if they would have fought at featherweight. I think.
Absolutely. Do we have a guest joining us? Oh, okay. I
thought
thought
Ian Gary was walking over here, but he just walked by.
He's just walking by.
I was gonna say hi to him.
Just kicking around.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. So in that fight, I think it's a very interesting fight because it's rare. You know, the featherweight division primarily has elite strikers rather. We don't have fighters that are that great with their grappling in terms of it being a specialty. I think both of these guys, that kind of is their specialty. You've got Ortega, who's phenomenal with his jiu-jitsu, and Diego Lopez. And I think on the feet, we'll see a boxing advantage for Brian Ortega, but we've seen a lot of power come from Diego Lopez as of late. Yeah,
exactly. I think, the more polished striker is going to be Brian, but I think Diego has some power in him, man. He's got some great power, and he's got a lot of power in snatching the submission. And obviously Brian Ortega is an incredible grappler. He comes from a great team with Henry Gracie and all that. And I'm excited to see if one of them can get a submission on and see how the other works out of it. Maybe we're going to see a submission escape that we hadn't seen before or something unique because, jiu-jitsu is always evolving. And it's such a young sport. And you see these guys come up with the new stuff. And Diego is a little bit younger than Brian, and Brian's trains with Henry Gracie, so a little bit more of an older style of jiu-jitsu coming from the Gracie clan. And Diego's coming with maybe a little bit more of a modern game. So it's going to be interesting to see if Diego can have the advantage over Brian in grappling.
And Diego's consistently getting these steps up in competition. I mean, his first fight is probably his hardest one, where he's fought Movsar Evloev
on short notice.
On short notice for and he made it a pretty close fight. But I think from there, when he started to get some momentum and traction, they've really incrementally moved him up from now Sadiq Youssef, phenomenal performance against him. A guy like Brian Ortega, though, you look, he's got 3 losses. Those 3 losses, Alexander Volkanovski, Max Holloway, and Yair Rodriguez, where he got kind of a freak injury during the fight. Like, this guy has only lost to the absolute best of the best, and I think that this is a massive step up for Diego Lopez. I'm actually surprised that he's the favorite in this one.
I didn't know he was the favorite. That's news to me, but actually I'm surprised about that because he has so much experience, Brian Ortega. And you notice that in these fights that when you come up against a veteran, like someone who's been in the UFC, who's been in the top 5 for a while, just how hard it is to put them away. You can bloody at Brian Ortega. He's got the fight. He's got the dog in him. And it showed in the last Yair fight. Like, he was losing early on, and then he came back and he finished him. It was pretty incredible, and I hope that. I know Diego Lopez is rising to the occasion, and he's taking this tough fight, and I hope he just understands that he doesn't have to try to blast through and get that 15th round, first round finish. I know he's got a lot of first round finishes, but to maybe chill out on trying to get it, forcing the first round finish, and just getting the finish as it comes up on its own. Maybe he gets the finish later in the fight, and I hope he doesn't gas out trying to impress everybody by also finishing Brian in the first.
Yeah, and I wouldn't be surprised if the next time we're here in Las Vegas for their fight at the Sphere that we're seeing both of those guys on that card. I think that would be a great fit with it being Mexican Independence Day.
Yeah, that'd be amazing. I think they're going to stack the card all one side, just Mexican fighters as much as they can. And, it's a compliment to say that you fight like a Mexican because they always put on the show. They're always willing to step in there and show their heart. When the times get tough, the Mexicans really rise to the occasion.
While we're on the subject, we went to the preview at the MSG Sphere.
Yes.
Where they showed the UFC graphics for the first time. We got to see Alexa Grasso kind of react to it. What did you think of that? It's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, they really put in a lot of time and effort to make things look so good in the UFC. They really take their professionalism to the next level. When you go to any other promotion, they don't compare it to the UFC. And how much money, we're talking about the fighters, how much they reinvest in themselves, how much the UFC is investing in their shows, right? I think he said the budget's going to be like $20 million to put that show on. It's an incredible budget, It just goes to show the testament to how the UFC is just trying to stay on top of everybody else.
And speaking of the MSG Sphere, you can catch the first round of the NHL draft here on Sportsnet later today from the MSG Sphere. And I'm not just saying that because my boss is in attendance and I have no notes saying to say that. I'm just saying it because it's going to be a really cool thing to see if you want a sneak preview of what the Sphere looks like for a live broadcast.
Yeah, that's going to be going on today.
Yeah, absolutely. Later on today. Round 1 of the NHL draft should be a lot of fun. We have about 45 minutes left for these athletes to weigh in. We've got, like I mentioned before, Peyton Talbott, Anthony Smith, and the title challenger in the main event,
Was the
Jiri
Payton,
Prochazka.
was the Payton Talbot fight short notice, or he had time?
No,
or?
I think he's had time.
Is that time? Okay, I'm surprised that it's taking him long. You know, he's like one of the largest favorites in UFC history.
He might end up closing as the largest favorite in terms of average odds on UFC history. Earlier this week, I saw it was 22-1. But you see this guy, like, if you see him walking around the Apex, he looks like a skateboarder. Like, you would never imagine that. not to, of course, judge a guy by the way he looks, but when you saw that, Bo Nickel was that big of a favorite. Yeah, he's got that wrestling pedigree.
Yeah.
Payton Talbot's just a great, young, well-rounded kid coming off the Contender Series. But, man, 22-1 in a UFC fight, a guy that's UFC level, that's
I was wondering, was it the bookies that made it that big, or was it the money coming in after?
Well, that's how it works. So if you're not familiar with how line movement works, I think that fight probably opened at around minus 400, minus 500.
Wow, minus 400 is still pretty impressive.
It's still
that
pretty
the bookies,
high.
yeah.
I give him a lot of respect. Payton Talbot looked phenomenal in his last fight against Cameron Simon. I think this is actually a step down in quality of opponent. Cameron Simon, to me, is a top prospect. Yeah, Giannis Gamuri knows his respect to the guy. I think that, in terms of skill level, I'm not sure quite where Cameron Simon's at. But it opened at minus 400, minus 500, and then you see the betting public they'll add it to parlays, and they'll bet on it, and they'll bet it, and then the steam comes in, and it gets all the way up to minus 2,200, right? So, I mean, usually we see a lot of underdog action come in on the day of the fight, and that's where I think the line will drop, and I would be surprised if it actually ends up being the biggest favorite, but we'll see. We'll know right around the time the fight rolls around. It's the first fight in the early prelims, which you can catch on Sportsnet. Yeah,
and you know what's interesting is that, like, I wonder how it affects his opponent. You know, is Gamuri going to be diminished? Like, oh, he's going to be slumping around. I'm excited to see how he takes it, being such an underdog. Or is he going to be like, you know what? Everyone's doubting me. Let me step up my game and prove everyone wrong. And that'll really launch him. If he comes out there and, finishes him spectacularly, it can really boost him. Because I know his first outing wasn't his best. It wasn't, it wasn't a very hard-fought fight. It was a lot of, like, tip-tap with the striking. And, they kept kind of their distance. And I'm hoping that this fight he bites down on his mouthpiece and he takes it to Talbot so that, he can increase his value, because UFC just really wants you to put on a performance. UFC doesn't really care if you win or lose. You see some of the fighters in the UFC, they take a 2-3 fight losing streak, and they're still there. Why? Because they put on great fights. So I'm hoping Gamuri goes in there and just puts on a show and doesn't really hesitate too much just because he's an underdog. Yeah, sometimes you're a bantamweight, you're a big underdog, and then suddenly you have the longest Canadian win streak in the UFC, if 4 straight wins.
That's and your name's Aiemann Zahabi, and you're standing right here next to me.
I'm tied for breaking I was like the 9th largest underdog in UFC history, tied. There's like 3 of us tied for that, which is pretty awesome. I love that. I mean, I took it as fuel. I didn't even actually know like how much of an underdog I was. But after the fight, we saw the numbers, and my brother Faraz was insulted. He didn't like that.
It doesn't take much to insult Faraz, I'll say. But
no, he's a great guy. He's funny. He was just like, they don't think we can come up with a game plan. Like, a lot of this fighting stuff is about game planning too, right? Like, anybody can beat anybody if they have the right key to that lock. If you don't have the right key, you can't open that door. So it was nice that I was saying it just before I got cut off because somebody was weighing in. But with Tan Lee, who's amazing, he was one FC champion. Yeah. And when he came in 3 weeks before the fight, he found that hole. Took us a few days, but he found that hole in my game, and I changed up the game plan based on his advice. And I went up and ended up winning the fight. So it was pretty amazing. Like, you never know what these guys see in their opponents or what their coaches see, and then they come around and they make these game plans. And if their fighters are disciplined enough to execute that game plan, you might be interested. You might be, taking a lot of money from people's parlays.
Are you willing to share what that advice was? What you noticed that you had in your game plan that you were able to clean up?
Oh, it was my stance. I was standing in a way that was, we call it top heavy.
You want to show us?
Yeah. So I was standing more upright than I was with a rounded back. When you have a little more of a rounded back, you can absorb the strike better than if you're tall. You can get pushed around. And the thing is, I was standing tall because I didn't want to get kneed in the face by Javed. Like, he was known to throw flying knees. So I was worried that if I came into exchange and I was too bent over, that I would get hit with the knee. So then he showed me a clever way to fight a Taekwondo guy and not absorb the knee. So then you see in the fight, I never get hit with one knee to the face. He got me with one knee to the body. When I threw a punch, he countered me with a knee to the body, but no knees to the face. So I was able to adapt what Tan showed me, and that really helped me win that fight.
Absolutely. Well, it's great to see, and like you said, you can't count out underdogs. People will change that betting line and they'll bet on it. But Giannis Gamuri is a gamer, and again, if you're at the UFC level and you're facing somebody, and Payton Talbot has 2 or 3 fights under his belt, to have to be that big of a favorite, I think, you know, I don't think you can put that level of a confidence. Like, to me, if you think Peyton Talbot's that much better, you take him by submission, it's like 6-1.
Yeah.
Like, I've always said, if you have a striking-based fighter, and they're that, well, speaking of Peyton Talbot, why don't we take a look at the scale, because he's about to get on the scale.
Oh,
But
of course.
I always say, if you're that big of a favorite and people think you're that much better than the other fighter, you look at the winning outcomes and you take the one that's the least likely, because if they're that much better, they should be able to get a submission.
That's a good point, yeah.
Let's take a look at Peyton Talbot. He's heading over to the scale right now. He's not asking for a towel, so that's a good sign. Or a box, rather.
135 and a half, the official weight for Peyton Talbot.
All right, Peyton Talbot is on weight, and we have 40 minutes remaining in the weigh-in window here for UFC 303's official weigh-ins, waiting on just Anthony Smith and Jiri Prochazka in the light heavyweight division.
Yeah, I mean, he must have just wanted to sleep in and
Maybe.
make weight a little later and enjoy his rest, you know. Everybody has their own plan, and it looks like he's happy. The way he flexed on camera, he looked phenomenal. It doesn't seem stressed at all about his rehydration or anything like that. So we can expect him to be on his game tomorrow.
This guy never seems stressed about anything. I don't know if you heard him talk. He's just very laid back.
I've seen a few clips of him online. Yeah, he seems like very mellow and
He's
goes
a
with the
different
groove.
kind of cat, which I like.
Yeah,
you know,
which is good.
He's not afraid of being himself.
One thing that's cool about MMA is we have so many different personalities, and any one of them could be champion. You know, whether you have a different striking base, or you have a wrestling base, or you have a jiu-jitsu base, you can be champion. If you're a very high-stress, strong guy, you're very serious, you can be champion. If you're a funny, goofy guy, you can be champion. We've seen it all. We've had everything in UFC.
Look at your division. I mean, Sean O'Malley, I think, is a great archetype for that. A guy who's got really, really solid striking, good grappling as well, and a guy that's very much himself. You know, a guy who has really done a great job of marketing himself in this game.
Yeah, of course. And you see he's got a very successful YouTube channel as well. And, you know, he makes funny videos. And him and Merab have been going back and forth. I think Merab has really turned the corner when it comes to YouTube. You guys should check him out. He makes some of the funniest content there is in the MMA.
And Sean was actually here earlier, and he said, hey, guys, you can use my belt for your set. And that was very nice of Sean to do
Actually,
that
I
for
thought
us.
I heard Sean say that you can take the belt home.
Yeah, I can take it home. Yeah, I think he might have said that as well. He said, you know, I've got another one kicking around at home. You can just take it, and you can just give it to your son as a gift. I think that was very, very classy of Sean O'Malley.
Yeah, that's amazing.
I definitely didn't make that up either. Definitely didn't make that up. Let's keep going down the card and take a look at the rest of the main card.
Who's missing?
In terms of making weight? Right now we're still waiting on Anthony Smith and Jiri Prochazka, two light heavyweights. But why don't we go over to Anthony Smith's fight? We got him taking on Roman Dolidze in the light heavyweight division. Dolidze typically fighting at 185, but he told us earlier today he wants to be ranked in both divisions. So I think that's a really good way for him to look at it. We're starting to see fighters bounce between two divisions. I think that's a really interesting thing to see because it gives them more opportunities.
Yeah, so they can fight more often, you know, because sometimes you get stuck with one fight a year or maybe 2 fights a year, and maybe you want to do more. So if he can bounce around 2 weight classes and take some short notice fights, especially if it's heavier, it's going to be much easier for him to take something more last minute than if it's in his own weight class, right? So he's probably just trying to maximize his how many fights he can get per year.
Yeah, we're seeing fighters like Kevin Holland, of course, is notorious for doing this.
Notorious,
185, 170, apparently rumored to potentially be on the Denver card in a couple of weeks, but no opponent found for him at this time.
Yeah.
And we also have Jessica Andrade, who just actually had a big fight announced for her recently against Natalia Silva. I think that's a tremendous fight. Yeah, that's going to be, I believe it's September 7th, if I recall correctly. Awesome matchup. But Jessica Andrade has been going between 125, 115. Used to fight at 35 even. Yeah. But
speaking about Denver, though, that card has been taking quite a bit of a hit too, as well, right? I think Mike Mallet, his opponent, had pulled out.
Yeah.
And then they were looking for another opponent for him, but then he had already sustained injuries before his opponent pulled out, but he was just going to tough it out and show up to the fight anyway because, you know, if he signs a contract, he wants to be there. And then when his opponent pulled out, his coaches told him, look, you kind of had this injury already. It wasn't going to be you weren't going in there 100% already. Maybe we can take this opportunity to let this injury heal and take a fight on a different date, right? And these are the kind of things that happen, and UFC is working hard to make that card just as good as it was going to be.
Yeah, I said to somebody who worked at the UFC this week, you couldn't pay me $3 million a year to be a matchmaker here. It seems like the highest stress job on the planet. You're just constantly trying to fit pieces of the puzzle into not only fit pieces of the puzzle, but build new pieces to build into the puzzle and constantly change the puzzle.
Yeah,
it's just, it seems like a crazy job to have.
But these guys they've been getting it done time after time. Even for me, when I was fighting in March, the fight was announced to be in Saudi Arabia. But then I don't know, something happened, and then they had to change it. And I remember everyone was calling me and texting me, "Oh, what's gonna happen? Is your fight off?" This, and I'm like, "Listen, guys, don't even worry about it. UFC's probably gonna put it at the Apex. It's amazing that they have that place. Anything that goes wrong, I don't have to worry. I know they're gonna take care of me." I didn't stress. 5 days later, my manager messages me, "Oh, by the way, the fight's now at the Apex." I'm like, "Yeah, I didn't stress about it. And UFC is gonna have our backs. They're gonna find a way to make it work." I know a lot of people, as fighters and fans and media members, they don't necessarily love it when fights are at the Apex, but it's such a great tool to have that gives them the freedom that if anything goes wrong, the show can go on. Everything can continue to work, and that's what separates UFC from so many other sports. Like when COVID happened, etc., or whenever those things were going on, UFC was the first sport to keep pushing through, and invested the money and made things happen. Fighters can continue to get paid.
Yeah, so going back to that Denver card, that's the next UFC event. A couple changes there, like you mentioned, against Gilbert Urbina has been canceled from that card. The main event, which originally featured Rose Namajunas, her opponent, unfortunately, Macy Barber, had to pull out of the fight as well, and now she has been replaced by Tracy Cortez. And I saw that Markel Medeiros is out of his fight as well, so they're still making some changes to that card. I think they're still trying to add one big fight kind of on short notice, but hey, look at this card, UFC 303. They're able to pull rabbits out of their hats all the time.
Yeah, it's amazing how well they work and the communication they have with the fighters. Even there was a fight, actually, I think it was Kelvin Gastelum.
Yeah, and
Daniel Rodriguez, right? And there was an issue with the weight, and I think Kelvin Gastelum was the one who couldn't make weight. So he actually told him quite early in the week. So then they gave Daniel Rodriguez a new contract with bigger pay, with more fights to make sure that the show goes on. They always find a way to make it also kind of almost a win-win for the fighters too.
Absolutely, and I think that that fight ended up being, I think that Kelvin ended up having an advantage of that fight. Like Rodriguez, when he found out that Kelvin wasn't going to make weight, was like already at 179 pounds.
Mm-hmm.
So that puts you at something of a disadvantage.
Yeah, and I think there's something like 70% of the guys who missed the weight end up winning.
Yeah, I've always wondered about that stat because it seems like it's different, like year over year it changes. It feels like one year.
Is it fluid?
Yeah, it seems
it's
like
a very fluid.
Yeah.
Because usually we think that, because he didn't make weight, he must be weak. He broke. But man, he's less dehydrated. So it's both. Sometimes it's an advantage. Sometimes it's a disadvantage. Depends how hard they tried and when they phoned it in.
Yeah, speaking of which, a couple changes on this card. We have 155-pound co-main event now. Diego Lopez and Brian Ortega pivots to 155 pounds. And we did have one weight miss earlier today with Gian Silva weighing 147.5 pounds for his fight with Charles Jourdain. We did get Charles Jourdain's live reaction to that. Hopefully you can rewind a little bit and check it out. He was not happy.
He was not happy, actually.
He was happy like 3 minutes before he came in.
He was all smiling.
He was
nice.
And then his opponent gets on the scale and misses weight, and
his face just changed to serious business. No, but
and then showed why we can't put this on TV, because he was like going on a profanity-laced tirade. But you continue.
I mean, it happens. I mean, it is very upsetting to know that, because potentially the fight could technically be off, right? Because once the fighter missed weight,
the commission might not clear them.
They might not clear him, and the contract's technically broken, right? So that's why now the UFC has to get involved and offer Charles some of his opponent's purse.
You said in Nevada.
I think up to some people get more, some people get less. It all depends on the situation, And I think he can maybe get 30% because he came in so early. Mm-hmm. Like if he came in last minute, they might have just given him 20% because this kid really tried hard. Yeah. He pushed it all the way to his limit. It is what it is. But if you come in an hour to go, you got to pay extra. Yeah, I hope he gets paid extra.
Yeah. We'll see if we can get word on that. Maybe Dan can do some digging around for us and find out if they have a percentage that will take place. Or maybe I'll text Charles at some point in time. But either way, that fight hopefully will still be on. We'll find out. But you had an opponent, Draco Rodriguez, missed weight. So tell me about how that process went when that happened.
That's interesting story. So I came in, I had come off two losses in a row. And it was my first fight during the whole COVID era. And I go on the scale. I get there early. So I got in like 9:05. I was on the scale. And he was like only a few guys behind me. So I get on the scale and make weight. And when I saw him behind me, I was like, oh, he must have made weight because it's so early. He's got 2 hours to go. There's no way he's missing weight. By the time I walked over and sat down, we hear his weight, and he was 4.5 pounds over. And I'm like, in my head, I'm like, oh, fight's off. I'm like, listen, 1 pound, I get it. 2 pounds, I understand. But 4.5 pounds, it's quite a bit of weight. So Sean Shelby had come over, and he asked me, he's like, well, do you still want the fight to go on? I'm like, listen, I'll be honest with you. 1 or 2 pounds, I'll take it. 4.5 pounds, he's in a totally different weight class. tell him to go back. I'm like, he's 27 or 26 years old that he was at the time. I'm like, he's young enough. I'm in my 30s. I made weight. You know, he could make weight. Send him back to the sauna. He's like, well, he doesn't feel like going back to the sauna. Like, how does he not feel like going back to the sauna? He's got 2 hours to go. What kind of professionalism is this? And Sean Shelby's like, okay, well, how many fights do you have left on your contract? It was my last one. And I had won my first fight in UFC. I lost 2 in a row. So I was on my deathbed. It was make or break for me on that one. And he said, okay, how about this? How about I give you a new contract for more money. I give you a percentage of his purse. And that way, you know, you feel better about taking the fight. I said, yeah, I'll take it. So I signed the new contract. I got a big bump in pay. I was very happy about that. And then I started rehydrating. Like I told you, as I sat down, they announced it. So I didn't start rehydrating. So I started rehydrating. And all of a sudden, I felt like I was getting some sort of cramp. So I was about to cramp. So they give you this little thing. It's called the hot shot. And it's just packed with sodium to avoid cramping. And I didn't realize how spicy it was going to be. They told me it'd be spicy, but I didn't think it was going to be.
It's called the hot shot, Aiemann.
Yeah, but I didn't think it was going to be that spicy.
That being said, you just got on a scale. And
yeah,
your
I just
brain's
got a
probably
scale.
not all there.
My stomach's, you know, it's not great. So I take the hot shot, and I'm like, oh no. I felt like acid reflux or whatever, and I had to start vomiting. So as I'm walking backstage, I started throwing up in front of everybody, trying to get to a trash can. I couldn't get to a trash can. I just vomit on the floor. And then they send the paramedics to me. I'm like, oh my God, get the paramedics out here. I just signed a new contract. I'm about to make way more money. Please, I need this fight to go on. So the paramedics checked me out. They're like, are you okay? I said, yeah. I told them about the hot shot. They're like, okay, we'll just give you some bread and a bagel. And I drank some water. And I got over it all. And then the next day, I go in there and I knock out Draco in the first round, like in less than 3 minutes. So I waited till the end of the night. They announced the bonuses, and not only did I get more pay, percentage of his purse, they also gave me the 50 Gs
and
for
the new
overcoming
contract.
it. And
Yeah.
the new contract. So I made so much money. And then I called my wife to celebrate, and I'm like, hey, babe, I also got the 50 Gs, blah, blah. She's like, oh, my God. She's like, we just bought a house. We can redo the kitchen. I'm like, I'm very busy. I got to go. Bye, bye, bye. And I hang up the phone. I get there on Monday. We hired a contractor. I redid the kitchen. She spent the money before I even got any of it.
Yeah, well, at least you get to enjoy a nice kitchen, right?
Yeah, my house is beautiful. I'm very happy.
Yeah, that was that's a great story. Thank you for sharing that with
no,
us.
my pleasure, man. These are the things that are really interesting, and it's something that it's cool to ask the fighters what else is going on in training camp. You know, even me, my last fight, this fight with Javid, I had gutted my basement, so the contractors were in and out of my house for the entire camp for 2 months straight. I had these guys coming in the morning, leaving in the afternoon, but you know, it's just something I deal with because. In life, like for me to be successful, you have to be able to do obviously your work life, but also you have to balance your family life, right? Because at the end of the day, you have to be there for your kids, you have to be there for your wife, and you have to be successful in that realm as well, not just be selfish and only focus on work, and things like that, right? You have to come back to your family and your friends.
While we're on the subject of the weight miss for Jourdain Silva, let's talk about the Canadians on the card. We've got Charles Jourdain, Marc-Andre Barriault, Gillian Robertson. They all made weight today for their fights. Why don't we first talk about Marc-Andre Barriault's fight? I think he's got the toughest matchup of the 3 Canadians against Joe Pyfer. I mean, this guy hits hard, really good wrestling pedigree. What do you think is Marc's key to victory here? Because you kind of touched on it with Marc when he was here.
Yeah, I actually watched the tape of Joe Pyfer's last fight, and just to make sure, like, if I could give him any type of advice to Marc-Andre Barriault, I would, you know, because he's Canadian and I want to see him do super well. I think that he did show some holes in his game in terms of movement. Like, Joe Pyfer is really great offense, but when it came down to the second half of the fight, you notice that when he goes backwards, he can defend himself from the strikes very well. And we didn't see him getting taken down or anything, but I don't think Marc-Andre Barriault is going to go for the takedown. But he's got such a great gas tank, Barriault. And if he gets a good enough warm-up where he can start the first round the way Jack was fighting Pyfer in the rounds 3 and 4 and 5, I think he can diminish Pyfer's cardio because he's so explosive, he's so strong that we can maybe diminish him and get a finish later on in this fight. I don't think either guy gets put away early because Barriault is very strong. He can take the punches power because, you know, he talked about how strong Pyfer's punch is. I think Barriault can take enough, but also get him moving backwards where he can't throw as hard, where he won't be as comfortable being offensive. And Barriault can really take this fight over. It comes down to game planning, honestly. And if he's prepared to bite down on his mouthpiece and move forward, I can see him winning this fight.
Well, if there's one guy that doesn't care at all about odds and hype, Marc-Andre Barriault is that guy.
No.
I mean, he's just a scrapper. He's happy to take a fight against absolutely anybody. And for him, he's constantly evolving. We're seeing a lot of evolution, but I think it's mostly refinement. Like, I think you see what he does best, and it just seems like that's getting better and better. Like, his cardio, like you said, is amazing. He's gritty. He's good defensive wrestling, good offensive wrestling. Just he's a guy who knows how to win fights and solve problems on the fly.
And his last fight was against a ranked opponent. Chris Curtis was ranked.
Yeah.
And that was a really close fight. Honestly, like, it was such a close fight that if I think, in my opinion, that if Barriault did what he did later in the fight, earlier against Chris, it could have been more in his favor, right? And I spoke to him about that, he kind of mentioned that too. Like, if he could just started stronger earlier, that maybe he would be a ranked guy right now, right? So I don't think that Joe Pyfer intimidates him in any way. He's ready to fight the top guys right now in terms of mentally. But now, can he put together the game plan to work his way up the rankings?
Yeah. It's amazing what a game of inches it is, because you look at the Chris Curtis fight, he loses to Curtis. Curtis then fights Brendan Allen, and then he's winning that fight until like the last minute of that fight.
Yeah.
Like, he would have been probably a top 7 middleweight right now, if not for like the final minute of that fight against Brendan Allen, who had so much hype behind him at the time, right? So it's really amazing how just these little ebbs and flows of this game can make or break your career.
You know, people talk about it all the time, MMA math. You know, we got another fighter coming in right now.
Heavyweight contender and former undisputed UFC champion, Jiri Prochazka.
He's looking strong, Jiri.
.204 and a half, the official weight for Jiri Prochazka.
With pants on.
That, UFC 303 championship main event is now official.
I was going to say, he even kept the pants on. So 204.5 pounds for both Alex Pereira and Jiri Prochazka. Our main event is official. The light heavyweight championship will be on the line for the rematch between Alex Pereira and Jiri Prochazka. Testament to both these guys taking this fight just a couple weeks ago, getting on the scale and making that weight. You know, Jiri's not particularly the biggest light heavyweight. And Alex, of course, has fought at middleweight before, but at the same time, still very difficult. If you're walking around 230, 235, you get on the scale and you have to cut that weight.
But the bigger you are, the more water we can drain out of your muscles, right? Because your water, that's where all the water is being held, is in your muscles. So the larger your muscle mass, the more we can drain you. I think Brock Lesnar has like the largest weight cut in terms of water weight in 48 hours or something. I think he lost something like 30-something plus pounds in 48 hours, which is incredible.
Yeah, to make heavyweight.
To make heavyweight, he
265.
must be walking around almost 300 pounds or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, him being big isn't exactly breaking news for us. But
No, but how much water he lost
pretty
is pretty incredible. Like,
Yeah.
I don't lose that much. Imagine I lost 30 pounds of water. I mean, I'd disappear. I'd be dead.
He'd be a puddle. Yeah. So Anthony Smith is the last individual that we're waiting for. We have about 23 minutes remaining for him to get on the scale and make weight as the final fighter to get on the scale. We're still going to find out what's going on with Jean Silva, if he's going to make another attempt. I saw him walking around a little bit earlier, but I would be surprised if he's going to make another attempt. So we'll find out what's going to happen with that. All right, Aiemann, let's continue talking about the Canadians. I just mentioned Jean Silva. Charles Jourdain came here and pretty much laid out the blueprint for how he thinks he can beat Jean Silva. What do you think of his strategy?
I think it's great. You know, straight shots usually beat looping shots. Now it's going to be a matter of executing. And I mean, like we spoke about, he has that confidence because he must have drilled that game plan to a T. And he's looking. He doesn't care if Jean Silva knows about it. He knows that he's going to go out there and he's going to execute. And I think it's a great game plan. And we haven't seen that many fights of Jean Silva, but he does have a lot of finishes. And he's got that power. So I'm hoping that with the idea of punching straight, doing straight strikes, and Charles's foot speed advantage, that he'll be able to avoid getting hurt and being able to finish this fight.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's it's interesting that he's so willing to lay that out too, and I think that shows his confidence that he's willing to just tell you exactly how he thinks he's going to win this fight.
Yeah, exactly. And when you're brimming with confidence, you know, it's good. Your self-image is large so that you can fight to your best capacity. You know, I wish we would have had Jean Silva come over here and ask him a few questions, maybe about the weight or what his plan is too, just to get a more in-depth look into that fight, because it's very interesting. But another Canadian on the card is Gillian Robertson. And, you know, her game plan is to take down Michelle Waterson-Gomez. And Michelle was keeping her game plan too close to her chest. She didn't really want to tell us or tell the fans or to let it out so Gillian can hear about her plan. But I think the obvious thing would be to stay on her feet.
Yeah, I think that the distance control is really what it comes down to. We talked about this a little bit earlier. If you're just tuning in, you might have missed it. When you look at Michelle Waters and her karate style, her best range is being more at distance. And I think that with a fighter like Gillian Robertson, who's best path to victory is to get at the ground, to go for submissions. I mean, she's all-time leader in submissions in women's UFC competition.
Yeah.
I think that that's going to be the key for Michelle Waterson-Gomez, is just, you know, if she can't grab you,
Yeah.
you're not going to get submitted, really. I mean, it's like
Yeah.
that's kind of the range battle that I think is going to take place in this fight.
Yeah, and what's interesting is that usually when like the striking gets heated, a lot of times fighters, they collide. So she's really, Michelle's really gonna have to avoid any type of collision, and she's gonna have to kind of be on her bike in a bit. And what's interesting, you know, we're talking about judging criteria all week. Moving backwards or circling or moving side to side is not necessarily bad as long as you're the one doing the damage, right? So yes, she's gonna have to avoid these collisions from Gillian, but at the same time, she's gonna have to juggle that with landing strikes that show damage, because she doesn't want to be going backwards and circling around and not scoring any big damaging strikes, because then she's going to be losing the fight in terms of, you know, the next criteria is down the list. But if she can be on her bike and score big strikes, I think she can find herself a victory.
Yeah, well, you can't be opportunistic if the opportunities don't present themselves. And I think that's what Michelle Waterson-Gomez is going to try to do, is make sure that she doesn't give those opportunities. Because all it takes is one for Gillian Robertson. If she gets that fight to the ground.
Exactly. Gillian is just so slick on the ground, and she's so smooth. And I know Michelle does her grappling too. But you know, the amount of submissions Gillian is doing in this league is just incredible how good she is. And then you see her last fight, the ground and pound. Like, she controlled her opponents for so long, and she didn't get fatigued doing it either. So I'm hoping that we get to see some of that top control as well.
And Gillian's a pretty sizable favorite in this fight, but if you look at the level of competition that both of them have fought, it's not even comparable. Michelle Waterson-Gomez, she mentioned, has fought Joanna Jędrzejczyk.
Yeah.
She's fought Rose Namajunas. Like, she's fought the best of the best strawweight. So she's not going to be intimidated by Gillian Robertson at all.
Yeah, but you know, I was wondering what your thoughts on this, because like now I think Michelle has lost a few in a row.
Yes, absolutely.
You
I
know,
think
so
4 in a row.
4 in a
if
row.
I'm not mistaken, yeah.
And she's got her back against the wall, you know, and she might be using that as fuel to make sure she doesn't lose this one. And for Gillian, it's kind of also a double-edged sword, because it's kind of like we expect her to win, because her opponent is coming off 4 losses. We expect her to give her 5th, but if she loses to someone who lost 4 in a row, it's kind of a stain on her record as well in that sense too, you know.
And Gillian, I think, just had one of her most brilliant performances earlier this year
this
in
last
Toronto.
one,
And she got the TKO finish, which I'm sure she was happy to have.
I think it's only her second.
Yeah,
right?
She's mostly submission.
Yeah.
So I think she was very proud of that performance. But this is the interesting thing about MMA, is like you see a lot of these fighters get momentum off of fighters that are a lower level of competition than when you get to the upper ranks of a division. And you see these fighters' momentum face fighters that are, I guess, on the downside of their career. They're a little bit older, but at the same time, those fighters still have all of those miles against top level competition. So you should never really be surprised. I mean, Anthony Smith is a good example from his last fight against Petrino. You know, he was a big underdog in that fight, but manages to get a first-round submission because the guy in front of him is not going to show him anything he hasn't seen before.
Yes,
and I think that's a really important factor when it comes to these veteran versus, you know, fighters that are on the come up type matchups.
Yeah, it's cool that you mentioned that, because it does take a lot of experience to become really good at MMA, because there's so many variables. Anything can go well and anything can go wrong in there for you. And you see that now a lot of fighters enter their peak at around the age of like 32. Around the age of 32, we see the fighters be their best. And because you were talking to this with someone else during this week about how, you know, experience really matters. And you were saying how Ian Gary is a guy who's younger, but who fights like he has a lot of experience. Like he's not shying away from this test with MVP. He feels like he has the experience to see the holes and to execute a game plan, even though he's the younger fighter. And that's something that's really interesting, because not a lot of guys have, you know, that much confidence in their experience at such a young age.
Yeah, and I think the thing that makes Ian pretty special is that while he does exude so much confidence, he also has a lot of self-awareness when it comes to his actual fighting. You know, when he's in the cage, he's able to know on the fly what he did wrong and make those little corrections and adjustments that make him, I think, a future title challenger, in my opinion. I think he's that good. So I'm very curious when you have a fight like that with Ian Gary and MVP. MVP is another guy who's fought so many different high-level guys, at least at the Bellator levels. You've got a guy, I think Douglas Lima is a guy that's as high level as anybody ever was at welterweight. You know, your friend and teammate Rory McDonald fought him. I'm very curious to see how MVP does against Ian Gary, because MVP is a guy that can throw you a lot of different looks. And even no matter how well prepared you are, you're still seeing things that you've never really seen before. And I think that's what makes MVP very special.
Yeah, MVP is very special, and we spoke to him earlier today, which was, if you guys didn't see it, it was really interesting to see. He's very confident. He says that all the banter that goes back and forth doesn't really faze him. You know, he does it just to do the gamesmanship, right? And we talk about the wholesome moment that when he went backstage and he saw that Ian Gary's son, and Ian was like serious at the time, but then when MVP spoke about how cute his son was, they kind of both like, yeah, he's like, yeah. They will, just have a wholesome moment between friends and family type thing. But both these guys mean serious business, And people say that, oh yeah, but he hasn't faced the type of quality opponents that we have in the fighters that we have in the UFC. But like you mentioned, Douglas Lima. I think Douglas Lima would do very well in the UFC if he had crossed over, especially during the times when MVP fought him, right? So he has faced competition, and then in the end, every fighter is so unique. Everybody's their own puzzle, really. So I'm interested to see, how both of these guys. This is really a chess match. I think this might not be the most bloody fight we've ever seen. It's going to be two guys trying to figure each other out and trying to finesse the other.
Yeah, real-time problem solving is why we love this sport. We get to see people do that on the fly. We've got 15 minutes remaining in the weigh-in window, still waiting on Anthony Smith and perhaps to see if Gian Silva is going to try to make another go of making the weight. Like I said, I kind of suspect that he won't, but we'll find out when we can and give you an update on that. For now, let's continue looking at the other Canadian. No, we touched on all of them. We've touched on all three Canadians, so that's good. Macy Chiasson. Very interesting fight against Mayura Bueno Silva. Mayura just fought for the championship, fell short against Raquel Pennington in Toronto earlier this year. Macy Chiasson, she's been a little bit up and down in her career, but when she's at her best, I think she's very, very difficult for anybody to beat because she's so well-rounded.
Yeah, we spoke to her just earlier this morning, if you guys missed it, and she seemed very
informative.
Very informative. She knew everything. She knows the ins and outs of weight cutting for women, and also she seemed very calm, cool, and collected. And I think she's using her opponent underestimating her as fuel, and she's looking to surprise everyone, and she says she's very focused to go and get the job done on Saturday.
Yeah, that I think has the makings of being a really exciting fight. I think they're both very, very opportunistic fighters, both fighters that have good striking, good grappling. So I'm actually very curious to see how that one plays out. That's on the main card as well. We touched on Gary and Page. Anthony Smith against Roman Dolidze. Let's see how Anthony Smith looks, hopefully in the next couple of minutes when he gets on the scale. But, it's really hard to prepare for both of them for a fight like that because neither of them were really preparing for any opponent. Yeah. Which I think can be good because then you're really focused on refining your own skills and you're training almost for yourself to be the best version of yourself and not even worrying about what your opponent's going to bring to the table.
Yeah, of course. And then it's a real test to see how good your problem-solving skills are fight night. I was talking with Charles also about how does he make sure he's on that day. And sometimes when you get no time to prepare, it can also be a blessing. For some reason, some guys, they shine on short notice fights more than they do when they've dwelt on it for too long. So you don't want to stay there and think about it. And some guys, their demons get into their mind when they have a fight booked for too long. If they have a fight booked 3 months out instead of a few weeks out, they might get in their head too much. So maybe we might see something interesting because they didn't have much time to think about it.
And why don't we talk about the prelims? You can watch the late prelim card on Sportsnet and Sportsnet Plus. We've got Peyton Talbott, Giannis Gamuri. We've got Charles Jourdain and Gian Silva, which we talked about. But one that I really have my eye on is Cub Swanson against Andre Fili, both of them making weight at featherweight. And both of them are kind of Iron Men of the featherweight division.
I'll be honest, I feel like we didn't talk about this fight enough.
I know,
this is a dark horse on this
Absolutely.
card. This fight is going to be a banger. Yeah. Oh, we have Jiri coming to join us right here.
Oh, excellent. Nice to see you again, sir.
Again.
He's in the main event.
You weighed in with the pants on. I love it. Yeah, a lot of confidence in that one.
So I guess my first question is, what took you so long to weigh in?
What took it? I just took a time for other people. I had a morning training, breathing and concentration, and I just wanted to do it in a calm, alone in a sauna. Just do it, good sleep, and no rushing.
Yeah, I guess that's what I was going to allude to. Is it's not a rush to get on the scale. You have 2 hours, so step on when you step on. But everybody's always worried when you see that somebody's not getting on the scale that perhaps they're going to miss. But no concerns. We saw you get on with the pants, and it's like, well, he's either going to be 10 pounds over or he's going to just be fine.
Yeah. I have just a little like a space on the scale, so I'm every time like that. I was just 30 minutes in the sauna, so for me it's not like a big thing to make a weight because I'm almost on my weight, like all the camp, yeah. because this is something what I need to do, what I think is essential for a warrior to be close his weight, to feel great all the time, not just to feel overweight and then needs to cut a lot of weight. So for me it's like normal.
I want to ask you. I know you had the interview with Aaron yesterday. And you spoke about how you're not bringing in any of your past fights into this fight. You know, you're not worried about taking revenge. You have no you have no bad emotions about him. But I was wondering, is there something that you would change in terms of game plan for this one? Are you potentially thinking about taking him
When
down?
I changed, or how did he change?
No, if you're going to change the game plan, like maybe
Sure.
take him down for this one instead of strike with him.
I
'Cause
took him down last time.
Yeah, but more. Like, and, you know, just
understand,
try to grind him
understand
out.
to keep it more. But listen, last time I thought and I felt like that was my game. That was my game, that first fight. And right now I just want to show that I am more dominant like last time.
Yeah.
And I will show that, and I'm going to win.
Good. I love the confidence. What is feeding that confidence going? And now that you've felt his power, you've felt his punches, you've felt him, you know, body to body, you've grappled him. Do you feel like do you take away something that, like, you know what, if I knew this before the fight, I can use it against him? Is there something that you learn from fighting him that you can bring into this fight?
It's not about like learn from that fight, but when you stand before somebody, I know I feel the spirit, feel his movement, feel his strength in his arms, in his legs, in his body. And right now, of course, it's smart to take some learn from the last fight, and I took a lot from that. And right now, I have to use that. I will. Yeah, sure. Because they spoke about that. DC spoke about that. That Alex will took me down like by some takedown, and I said, really? he wants to do that? Okay, if that.
It would be surprising for me.
Yes.
I think you would have the advantage in terms of like the wrestling, grappling
First
aspect.
and last of all, I wanna enjoy the fight. I wanna show my full power, and I'm happy that I'm healthy into this fight. And let's go for that.
Yes, we wish you all the best for this fight. Thank you for coming on and giving us a few moments. Thank you
Nothing
so
like a
much. All
Jiri
the best.
Prochazka fight. We always love and enjoy watching you fight. Thank you for doing this. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
Awesome. That was so much fun. Love speaking
Yeah.
with Jiri Prochazka.
I love him. You really feel the intensity, you know?
He's got
I
an
feel
energy. He's got a
amazing
strong
energy.
Yeah,
Amazing
strong
energy. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, real alpha-esque presence, you know, very intimidating.
Yeah.
But he's interesting. You know,
He's got conviction. I think that's like
Conviction,
that's the
yeah.
word I think that I would use to describe Jiri Prochazka. And everything he does with conviction, which I just think is a very special trait. And you can say the same kind of thing for Alex Pereira as well.
Oh, him too. He has a presence, you know. Both these guys have such an aura around them. You know, he was talking about how when you stand in front of a man, you really get to see his energy and his vibe and his aura. And he's been speaking a lot about that this week. And it feels like he's become more intense than ever. And I'm really excited for him to perform on Saturday and see if he can prove everybody wrong. You know, now they're saying that maybe Pereira might try to take him down, which would be surprising. Honestly, for me, it'd be surprising. Why? Because Pereira's so good at striking. Why would he spend the energy to take him down, where Jiri is actually really good at scrambling?
Well, one thing that we saw Alex Pereira learn was the judo throw from Kayla Harrison. I spoke to Kayla yesterday, and she says that if Alex hits that throw in the fight, she will present him with a judo yellow belt in the cage. After he got his BJJ black belt last time, this time judo yellow belt if he's able to
what
get
a
the
journey,
throw.
man. You know, he went from BJJ black belt to now starting a new journey at his age in
That's the way to do it.
judo.
Learn
Imagine.
Yeah, student mentality. You got to like that. Growth mentality.
Maybe in 5-6 fights we can see him get a judo black belt. Who knows?
Absolutely. Yeah.
That'd be amazing.
Takes time. Takes time.
But it's interesting that he was able to apply it right away in training. And
Absolutely.
I saw that actually in
Yeah.
the video. He did it pretty good.
Yeah, not bad,
He's
right?
really good. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think that the best fighters in the world are sponges, right? Like they can soak up the knowledge and apply it quickly. And I think that that's what makes Alex so special. Like coming over from kickboxing and then getting to this kind of a level that quickly. Like you must be able to soak up so much information on technique and be such a good student.
Yeah.
All right, here we go. Anthony Smith is the final athlete. We have 5 minutes left in the weigh-in window, and here we go.
Contender and former world title challenger Anthony Lionheart Smith.
Bringing out the box.
Yeah, bringing out the box. Anthony Smith will make another attempt momentarily with the Riz Pharma box.
He did take this fight on short notice.
Yeah, absolutely. I think he took the fight with Ulberg about 3 weeks ago, 2-3 weeks ago, and now has Dolidze in front of him. Let's see how this plays out.
Amazing.
206, the official weight for
Amazing.
Anthony Lionel
He has done it.
He has done it,
He
man.
has done it, ladies and gentlemen. 206 pounds for Anthony Smith. And we are told that Gian Silva will not make another attempt to make weight. The percentage of his purse that goes to Charles Jourdain is still being worked on. So that is your update. Those are the big news stories that have come out of this morning. First off, the co-main event between Diego Lopez and Brian Ortega is pivoting to the lightweight division. Both fighters make weight at lightweight. Gian Silva misses weight 147.5 pounds for his fight against Charles Jourdain. And he will forfeit, breaking news, everybody, courtesy of the UFC, 20% of his purse will go to Charles Jourdain. And that is a wrap for the UFC 303 official weigh-ins. Everybody on weight except for Gian Silva. Any takeaways? Oh, here we go.
Between Charles Jourdain and John Silva is a go, despite the Silva weight miss. Silva forfeits 20% of his
There you go.
purse.
Confirmed by the man, John Anik. So that'll do it for us. UFC 303 is ahead of us. Is there anything that you took away from today? Anything stand out to you?
That Saturday is going to be an exciting night, and you don't want to miss it. And I just want to say that the Cub Swanson Andre Fili fight is a fight that we didn't really touch on.
Yeah.
But I'm telling you guys, that's going to be a banger of a fight. Two guys who are absolute warriors, who always leave everything they have in the octagon. I don't know how we overlooked it.
Yeah, well, we shouldn't have.
Yeah.
Two great bet. I
Yeah.
That fight's going to be awesome.
But it's a
Two of my-
testament to
two of
how
my
good the
favorites.
card ended up being, that we had so much to talk about so many of these fights.
Absolutely. Well, it is UFC 303. You can order it on Sportsnet Plus if you'd like to watch the pay-per-view. The early prelims are on UFC Fight Pass in Canada. The late prelims begin at 8 p.m. Eastern on Sportsnet 360, Sportsnet Plus. We hope to see you then. That prelim card headlined by Canadian Marc-Andre Barriault taking on Joe Bodybags Pyfer. The main event of UFC 303, again, available to you on Sportsnet Plus, headlined by Alex Pereira and Jiri Prochazka, who have both made weight for the event. Aaron Bronsteter, Aiemann Zahabi, appreciate you joining us for the official UFC 303 weigh-in show.